Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, 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 good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Shidol Lashem Shir Chodesh Shir Lashem Ben Kol Odeh Shidol Lashem Barushmai Pasmayim Leyim Yeshua Sai
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יכה קר וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יכה קר וירח בלילה.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. We are, as usual, having some internet connectivity problems. I guess you guys are not surprised by that at this point. I actually, as I mentioned, I've been using a Starlink, which was excellent, but I'm not using Starlink this week. In a different place temporarily, and that's in preparation for. Well, I don't want to give too much away, so I won't say anything. When it happens, then it will happen. But at this moment, I think the internet connection is a little bit better. I don't know why it's doing that. Hold on, I'm just going to do one thing very quickly. Let's see if that works better. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? It's acting a little bit strange, but whatever. It doesn't really. Oh, God, that's weird. It's a weird glitch. But okay, it doesn't really matter. Okay. So, can you guys hear me okay? God, that really is annoying. Hold on a second. I'm going to quit Chrome and come back in. All right. Let's see. No, it's still doing it. All right. That's a glitch they'll have to deal with. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. And we'll just go on. Wow, that really is annoying, but we'll just have to deal with it. Okay. In fact, maybe let's see if I do this. Oh God almighty. God, that's annoying. All right. I'm just gonna have to power through like Hillary Clinton and ignore it. What can I do? Okay, so let's see. I got this sneeze. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to be digging in today to Leviticus chapters 10. We'll continue on chapter 10 that we began last week. The second half of chapter 10, or the second part of chapter 10, that's where we have the death of Nadav and Avihu, and then we have the fallout from there. And then we get to chapter 11, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. And then we get to chapter 11. Now, chapter 11 is laws of kashrut, kosher and unkosher foods. But really, from a Torah perspective, it's much more than that. It's the first time we get a formal, yes, there are allusions to this previously, but it's the first time we get a formal introduction into what constitutes the idea of clean and unclean in the Torah. What constitutes the idea, sometimes it's translated as ritually pure and ritually impure. Sometimes it's translated as ritually clean and ritually unclean. Sometimes it's translated as just clean and unclean or pure and impure. We're going to provide another definition, which is acceptable and unacceptable, or appropriate and disgusting, to put it in very colloquial terms, because that's really what it comes down to. The idea of kosher foods is actually quite simple. And the rabbis have made it so complicated, and they've actually even said that there's no explanation for it. It doesn't make any sense. That's baloney. There's a very clear explanation for it, and we're gonna talk about that explanation. And we're also going to talk about the idea of why Israel is held to the standard of refraining from eating unclean foods and being allowed to eat only clean foods, or let's put it this way, being given laws that require Israel to eat only acceptable foods and refrain from disgusting foods. And we could know already right off the bat that there is an intuitive idea of foods that are acceptable to eat, that are okay to eat, and foods that are absolutely vile, that are disgusting to eat. Okay, you would not take a dead rat off of the New York City subway platform, and believe me, there's plenty of those. Thank God I don't live there anymore. And eat it, right? Or even a live rat. You would not trap a live rat running through the New York City subway system or anywhere else for that reason, and fry it up and eat it. Okay, so that's, and it doesn't matter really what culture you're from. Almost, I mean, yes, there are some cultures that are so disconnected from anything that is any distinctions between what is disgusting and what is acceptable that they'll eat pretty much anything. Okay, I grew up around a lot of Chinese people, and quite frankly, yeah, unless you're starving, that's another story. And quite frankly, I had a lot of Chinese friends, but boy, the things they put in their mouths, it was just absolutely disgusting. Okay, so there are some nations that have absolutely no concept of any distinction between that which is acceptable to eat and that which is unacceptable to eat, and that really goes back to what we were speaking about last week. That the goyim, for lack of a better word, the other nations, it's difficult for them to understand the concept of the holy versus the profane, of distinctions. Yeah, really. Well, if the table's made out of a cat, they'll eat that too. The goyim, I'll just put it straight out, the goyim have trouble distinguishing between that which is holy and that which is profane. And as I gave a couple of examples last week, I'll give maybe some of the same examples or maybe some new ones. The idea of Shabbat. Okay, I've had some close interaction with a non-Jewish family over the past couple of weeks, and I saw that Shabbat there's no such concept of Shabbat for them. Maybe if they were religious Christians, but the religious Christians, gee, where did they get the idea of the Sunday Sabbath from? They got it from the Jews. They got it from the Torah. But there's no concept among, let's say, secular, Americans or just secular Christians of any day that's holy. Every day is just the same. The weekend is not. There's nothing holy about Saturday or Sunday. It's just a day to, to go do errands and do some shopping and maybe sit in the coffee shop with your friends or something like that. We'll relate to that also about when you're starving. When you're starving, anything goes. Okay, so the goyim, they really have trouble internalizing the distinctions or the concept of holy versus unholy, clean versus unclean. There are no distinctions, and this goes back to what we were talking about last week. That when Yahweh created the world, when He created the universe, He made distinctions. Right? He made distinctions between light and darkness. He made distinctions between day and night. He made distinctions between the water below the heavens and the water above the heavens, meaning the rain, the clouds, snow, all of this kind of stuff. He made distinctions between the dry land and the seas. What He does is make distinctions. He made distinctions between the different nations. He portioned out the different nations and gave these various nations their portions of land. To Israel, He gave the land of Israel. And so He makes distinctions. And if we are to emulate Yahweh, if He is to be our mentor and we are to be His disciples, which is ultimately what we're here in this world for, among other things. There's some other things maybe we're here for, but that's ultimately what we're here for. Then we are to internalize that idea that that He makes distinctions between things. And if you look at any society that is disconnected from Yahweh, take modern secular left-wing the United States of America or the West, then you'll see always what they do. It's always the same thing. They're going to blur distinctions. So maybe the classic example, or maybe the most current events example, would be the whole thing that's going on with the gender issues, right? The gender wars, as they call it. So the left wing, they're blurring distinctions between boys and girls, between men and women. There's no difference. Okay, there's no difference between a man and a woman. And if you want to say that there is a difference between a man and a woman, then you are sexist. You are against equality. They can come up with all of these supposedly lofty or seemingly on the surface, quote unquote, fair and just explanations for their reasoning. But ultimately, what it is it's a war. It's an outright war against Yahweh, because these people do not believe in the existence of Yahweh. They do not think that He created the universe. They do not think that He gave any laws. They do not think that He did anything. And so basically they are left as, orphaned children on the face of the earth to come up with their own ideas. But what they're really doing, since they were created by Yahweh, and whether they know it or not, is what they're really doing is subconsciously, or on their spiritual level, whatever's left of it, is rebelling actively against the ways of Yahweh. So these are outright rebellions. And we see this in any society that falls apart. We see this throughout history, and it's always the same, as I've been saying for years and years and years. When a culture goes south, it always goes south in the same way. When it disconnects from the paths of Yahweh, from the ways of Yahweh, it always does so, or it always ends up going down the same path, and that is explicit in the Torah. It always tends towards idol worship, towards violence, towards murder, towards the allowance of things that shouldn't be allowed, such as stealing. There's a rash in the United States right now of shoplifting throughout the big cities and maybe even the small cities. It always goes in the way of the loosening of distinctions, the erasure of distinctions between Yahweh's creation. So again, maybe in the United States, the classic example right now would be the erasure of any distinction between men and women. Men can become women, women can become men. A boy decides he wants to be a girl, then he can, without his parents' permission right now, in some states, I don't know what all the details are, it constantly change, but can go get hormone blockers, and you know the whole thing. I don't even have to go through it, right? So in the name of, and they always come up with supposedly lofty reasoning behind this, or lofty theories behind why they're saying this equality and it's not fair, and people should have self-determination and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately what they're doing is they're breaking down the distinctions between that. They're breaking down the distinctions that Yahweh put in this earth, the distinctions between male and female, the distinctions between holy and unholy, the distinctions between Israel and the rest of the nation, the distinction between the various nations, or as we may call them in this day, in this day and age, the different races. Okay, if you want to see an absolute disaster, look at the United States of America, which has basically promoted the idea that all the races there's no distinction between any of the races, and they can all live together happily as one big happy family. Is the United States one big happy family? No, it's on the brink of civil war. It's on the brink of destruction. Okay, and by saying what I'm saying, this is not racism. This is the opposite of racism. Okay, by saying that different races have different cultures, different characteristics, come from different places, have different lands, and the good fences make good neighbors kind of thing, that is actually the opposite of racism. And by saying, oh, there's no distinction between the races, we can all meld all the races together and we're going to have one big happy family, which is a lie. Just look at the United States of America. It's a complete failure. Then that is actually racism, because you're saying, oh, there's nothing special about this race or that race or the other race or the other race. Okay, I would like to see a world where the different races are living happily, pretty much among themselves, within their own lands, promoting their own cultures. Hopefully those cultures will be moving towards the ways of Yahweh, and we can all go visit each other. The Indians can go visit the Chinese, and the Africans can go visit the Americans, and the English can go visit the Mongolians, or whatever the case may be. And that would be a great way for everyone to live life. But when you try to jumble all of the different races together with this idea that we can break down the distinctions that Yahweh has made between the different nations, and that we're going to end up with one big happy human family, it doesn't work. It's not working. It's a complete failure. It's a complete disaster. Just look at the United States of America. Is it one big happy family, or are the different races, the different ethnicities, the different cultures, the different nations at each other's throats, vying for power and basically attacking each other, and sometimes very violently? Okay. So, okay. Any rate, so that is my take on things, but it all goes back to this idea of Yahweh making distinctions between the nations, Yahweh making distinctions between the sexes, Yahweh making distinctions between what is holy, what is unholy, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, what is clean, what is ritually clean and ritually unclean. And if we want to follow in the ways of Yahweh, we have to understand, we have to try to realize that he, as the creator, has the ultimate wisdom. He has a level of wisdom that is infinitely greater than ours. And if he makes certain distinctions, then that is his way of ordering the world, ordering the universe. And it would behoove us, it is our job, and it would be best for us to try to understand and internalize why he's made these distinctions, and then by following in his paths to follow these distinctions that he made. And getting back to what we're going to be speaking about today, when we get to Leviticus chapter 11, we're talking about clean versus unclean foods. That's the way it's usually translated, but really what it is acceptable versus disgusting foods. Some foods you should just not put in your mouth. And Leviticus chapter 11 tells us what those various foods are, the ones that we should or should not put in our mouths, the ones that are acceptable for human beings to eat, and those that are not acceptable for human beings to eat. Okay? So that's my take on things. That's my quote-unquote monologue for the day. And with that being said, I'm going to share the screen. And please, if I forget to share the screen, then always let me know when we're doing the actual study. The screen should be shared. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's see. Desiree says that is BS. USA and Russia always have these issues. Like all animals, it is not racist. It's different species, just like all the types of elephants. I'm not sure exactly what you're saying there, Desiree. So I'm just gonna skip it. Okay, so we're gonna now go into Leviticus chapter 10. And let me bring it up. So Torah. Remember, if you think of Yahweh as a great artist, if you think of his creativity, look at the plants, look at the animals, look at the beauty of the world he created, the natural beauty. Go out into nature and look at the beauty. You see, he makes these beautiful, beautiful creations. And how do you make a creation? You build something. You make distinctions. Okay, you make when Yahweh builds a beautiful flower, we paint a beautiful flower, right? We're putting things in order. And Yahweh, being the ultimate creator, having wisdom that's infinitely greater than us, than our wisdom as human beings, has this order that he places into the world. We have to try to understand it, internalize it, respect it, and not fight against it. And those societies that do fight against it, as the West currently is, especially the United States of America, they will quickly find themselves in the dung heap of history, as so many other nations who have done so in the past have now. That has been their fate. And as I said, nations that go off the path of Yahweh, that go south, they always do so in the same way. They always start blurring distinctions. They start worshiping idols. They start getting into sexual depravity. The Torah is not in any way, shape, or form. It is not an ascetic religion. It is not anti-sex. What it is anti-depraved or deviant sex. Okay, it's great if you go have relations with your wife, or in the Torah even your 10 wives and 500 concubines if you want, and if you can afford it. But it's not great if you have sex with your horse out in the barn, right? And any human being with some common sense can realize the distinction between those situations. So when societies go south, they start rebelling against Yahweh, and they always get themselves into the same mess, the same type of mess. It's violence, it's stealing. It's basically the 10 Commandments. It's adultery. It's not honoring your mother, and your father. It's not keeping the Shabbat, not making a distinction between one holy day of the year. Yes, that is for Israel, but I think there's evidence actually that it might even apply to the entire world. First of all, because it's placed in the 10 Commandments, although that's not definitive. But nonetheless, there are societies, of course, that have emulated and internalized this idea of a holy day, even if they don't do it exactly the same way as Israel does. But certainly the religious Christians somewhat treat Sunday as a holy day. I mentioned the Muslims somewhat treat Friday, quote unquote, mosque day, as a holy day. So those other religions, which are derivative religions from the Torah, have made this distinction between the rest of the days of the week and one holy day. So again, the societies that reject Yahweh and that follow their own path, they're always going to go down that same route of blurring all the distinctions between men and women, between what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, what you should have sex with, and what you shouldn't have sex with. And that always leads to much more depraved things. It ultimately leads to violence, murder, stealing, everything that we see right now that is rampant, especially in the big cities of the United States of America. And there is not much time left for the United States of America. I'm 100% convinced about that. I actually read an article, I don't know, I think it was off Drudge or something like that. So Desiree says there's nothing in the Torah that says other nations will be punished for not keeping the Torah. So let's see. Let's challenge that idea, Desiree. One of the laws in the Torah is do not murder, right? So do you think are you really saying that the other nations will not be punished if they violate the idea that one should not murder, if they go around murdering? All of the nations are human beings, right? Yes, Israel is supposed to be a model nation, but it's supposed to be a model nation because other nations, in many ways, are supposed to emulate it. It doesn't mean that every law in the Torah is applicable to all the nations. For instance, let's take the Passover offering and Chag HaMatzot. That has to do with a specific incident in the history of Israel. Namely, we as a nation exited from Egypt with the miracles and with the strong hand of God. But there are many laws in the Torah, and I can show you that even the laws of kashrut, which we're going to speak about, quote unquote kashrut, which we're going to speak about in Leviticus 11, already we see signs of this long before the Torah is given. Perhaps a classic example is that Noah brings 7 pairs of clean animals onto the ark and only 1 pair of unclean animals onto the ark. Well, what is clean and unclean animals? That's exactly what the Torah calls, quote unquote, kosher and unkosher animals in Leviticus chapter 11. So I strongly disagree with you. I think many of the laws of the Torah are applicable to all of humanity, okay? And there are some that are not, that are specific to Israel, but I think many more than we give credit for are actually applicable to all of humanity. That doesn't mean that they're in covenant with Yahweh to keep the laws of the Torah as Israel is, but they are essentially supposed to emulate Israel. They're supposed to learn from Israel. Israel is supposed to teach the rest of the world. Israel is a holy kingdom, is a goy kadosh, mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. It's a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and as such, we're supposed to teach the rest of the world what it means to set up a proper Yahweh following, Yahweh fearing society, and they're supposed to emulate us in this as much as possible. Okay. Yes, murder for the most part is not allowed in any nation. That's exactly my point. So don't say that none of the laws of the Torah are applicable to other nations, right? Certainly, if I go to, doesn't matter where, if I go to China, then certainly, well, I don't know what China's doing these days, but if they had any morality, then murder would be illegal. So therefore, they are keeping at least one law that shows that one law of the Torah, there is a law in the Torah that says do not murder, right? So that law is certainly applicable to all of humanity, not just to Israel, okay? All right. Anywho, we're getting off track here. So I hope my point is clear. And this last point is actually very important because the rabbis have this concept of the Noahide laws, okay? And a lot of times, and I think it really actually does a huge disservice because a lot of people, they come to Torah, or they get the bug, they want to become Jews, they want to follow the Torah, they want to be part of the covenant. And the rabbis say to them, well, you have either 2 choices, either do Orthodox conversion and become basically an Orthodox rabbinical Jew, or, and especially Chabad likes to push this, or keep the 7 Noahide laws. You're a goy. That's all you need to do is keep the 7 Noahide laws. Okay, and they have those 7 laws, which include things like do not murder, do not worship idols, no sexual immorality, set up court systems in your countries to adjudicate justice, and do not ever do not eat live limbs or limbs off a live animal, etc. So they have those 7 laws, and they say those are the only 7 laws that are applicable to non-Israelites. And I say that that's wrong. Actually, there are many laws in the Torah, many more laws in the Torah that are applicable to all of humanity. Okay, there are some that are not. The example I gave is Chag HaMatzot and the Passover offering. That is not applicable to all of humanity. Someone in China has no connection to the idea that has no history that their people were miraculously taken out of Egypt by God's hand, right? So that's something that's unique to Israel. There are other laws as well, such as Gidon Hashem, not eating what's usually translated as sciatic nerve. Israel's not to eat the sciatic nerve for a very specific reason. And that's because Jacob was injured in the sciatic nerve when he fought with the angel when he was on his way back to the land of Israel after fleeing from Lebanon. Okay, so there are some laws that are specifically geared towards Israel, but there are many laws in the Torah which Israel is in covenant to keep, but the rest of the nations would behoove the rest of the nations, or if the rest of the nations were smart, they would learn from the wise, this great and wise nation named Israel, and they would emulate these laws within their own societies. And in fact, they have done that. So the Sabbath is a classic example, is a great example. Both the Christians And the Muslims have emulated this idea of a Sabbath. Where did they learn this idea from? They learned it from the Jews. They learned it from Israel. Okay. Another example would be if you go into the Muslim world, and I've spent a fair amount of time in the Muslim world, and I don't mean among Arabs in Israel. I've been in Morocco, I've been in Tunisia, I've been in Turkey, and the Muslims have also an idea of clean and unclean animals. They also have an idea of quote unquote kosher and unkosher animals. So, for instance, in Sunni Muslim lands, obviously they don't eat pig, and they don't eat other animals which they consider unclean. I think the Sunnis, for them, again, it's complicated, but the Sunnis for the most part will eat seafood, whereas the Shiites will not eat seafood, will not even eat seafood. So they're emulating Israel in this concept of kosher and unkosher foods. This is something that is applicable. The idea of kosher versus unkosher is something that's applicable to the entire world. Yes, Israel is in covenant through the Torah to keep this, but the other nations also should have a concept and do have an internal concept of clean versus unclean animals. And those nations that choose to emulate Israel will instill in their societies, will infuse into their societies that same concept. So you have halal and non-halal foods within the Muslim world, which is generally, it's an approximation, or it's similar. It's based on the idea of kosher versus unkosher, clean and unclean animals in Leviticus 11. Okay, so yeah, that's right. He didn't say you can sell unclean animals to the foreign nations. It's very specific about nivela. It's an animal that died on its own. You could sell it to the other nations, and yes, you can do that because they are not currently making distinctions between clean and unclean animals. But try selling a dead animal, an animal that died on its own, to a Muslim. They won't accept it because they do have a concept of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to eat, and it's based on the Torah because they are an Abrahamic religion, right? Christianity with all its flaws and Islam with all its flaws, both of those are Torah derivative, or religions that are derived. They're Torah derivative religions. They're what we like to call Abrahamic religions, okay? And as Whitey Boy says, out of Zion shall go forth instruction and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, okay? And exactly right, Whitey Boy. The nations, we are supposed to be a model nation. The other nations are supposed to emulate us. We are in covenant. We are in contract with Yahweh to keep these laws. And if we don't keep these laws, we are severely punished. And the reason is because we're supposed to serve as a model society. We're supposed to serve as a model nation, that the other nations take all of the laws that are appropriate to them, as many as possible, and infuse them and use them and instill them in their own societies. Okay? All right. And so Desiree says, guarantee they were starving, they would not eat, they would eat it. Well, that goes also for Israelites, okay? I always like to say, the rabbis say there are 613 commandments. That's a number they kind of made up, but we'll just go with the 613. And I always say there's an unwritten 614th commandment, which is use your common sense, okay? If you're out in the desert, if you were an Israelite, if you were the Kohen Gadol and you're out in the desert, okay, and you're starving, and the only thing around is pig, then you not only should, in my opinion, you're a fool. You're required to eat that pig to stay alive. Okay, so everything has this. You have to attach the unwritten 614th commandment, which is use some common sense. Okay, all right. I don't want to go down this road. I've already stated what my opinion is on this, but I will sum up by saying, so the Karaite, or the Torah concept of quote unquote the Noahide laws, is not 7 laws. It's, I don't know, it's not 613, but maybe it's 500 of the laws. Okay, well, a lot of the laws have to do with, as we've been seeing over the past weeks, the specifics of the sacrificial system, the specifics of the building of the tabernacle, the specifics of the garb of the Kohanim, etc. So those laws obviously don't apply to all of the nations, but whatever is left over, all of the other laws that have to do with justice, have to do with how people live their lives, certainly most of the 10 Commandments, okay, except for maybe the first one, which states that Yahweh is our God who took us out of Egypt. That obviously applies to Israel, but most of the rest of the 10 Commandments, honor thy father and mother, do not murder, do not steal, etc. This clearly, anyone with any common sense knows that these are laws that apply to all of the nations. Yes, they were given to Israel because Israel is in covenant to keep these laws as a model nation for the entire world, to bring the entire world to a state of peace, to a state of happiness, to a state of returning to Yahweh. So we are in covenant. We have a special covenant with Yahweh to keep these laws, but these laws, many of these laws are applicable to all of the world, to all of the nations. Okay? All right. Okay, we can argue it out another time, Desiree. Okay, so let's get into Leviticus. I have to plug in a second, so let me do that actually right now. So we're going to pick it up in Leviticus chapter 10. So remember, last time when we left off, we had discussed the story of the death of Nadav and Avihu, one of really only two narrative sections of the book of Leviticus. We'll get to the other one eventually. And the rest is basically, straight out laws, dry laws, but we're trying to bring it alive and show what a beautiful system it really is. Again, speaking about how Yahweh sets up systems, how he uses his wisdom to form things. The sacrificial system is a beautifully laid out and set up system, and very logical, very makes a lot of common sense when you start understanding it. It's not, as the rabbis say, some just mystery that doesn't make any sense. It's quite the opposite. Okay, so we saw that Nadav and Avihu. Just give me a second here. I'm going to just plug in. Anybody do this without? So good. There we go. That's good. Oh, God, I hate this plug. Yeah. Actually, let me do it. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, let me do it. 1 second, please. Tips over a little bit. Like that. That. 1 second. Okay, that's fine. It's here. So on a practical level, when non-Jews come to me and say, I want to be a Jew, I want to be an Israelite, the rabbis only have two responses: either do Orthodox conversion or keep the 7 Noahide laws. And I say, you don't have to go all the way and enter the nation of Israel as a ger. There's another option, which is to be what I call a nilweh. Sometimes some of my friends have translated this as an ally or supporter. Basically, you're joined to Israel from the outside. It means you're not going all the way to be part of the covenant. You don't want to live in the land of Israel. I've mentioned this many times, so I'll just mention it very briefly. But you want to be attached to the nation of Israel because one wants to be attached to the nation of Israel because one understands that the nation of Israel is the chosen nation, and so one or such a person wants to cling to the covenant to as much of the degree is applicable to him or her. And I call this a nilweh. And this is what I think is the Torah or the Karaite analog of the 7 Noahide laws. And it's as different from the 7 Noahide laws as it is similar to the 7 Noahide laws. The only similarity is if you don't want to be part of Israel and yet you want to be attached to Israel, you don't want to be within that circle known as the nation of Israel, but you still want to be attached to Israel, you still want to follow the ways of Yahweh, you still want to follow the Torah, then the rabbis say that's the 7 Noahide laws, and I say that's being a nilweh. That's the similarity. The difference is that with the rabbinical 7 Noahide laws, it's just those 7 laws, and I say it's more like, I don't know, I'm just throwing out a number, 300 laws. It's all of the laws in the Torah that apply to all of humanity, including making distinctions between clean and unclean animals, between kosher and unkosher animals, as we shall see in chapter 11 as an example. Okay, so when someone comes to me, and believe me, I've been doing this Karaite thing now for a number of decades, and I've had my fair share of people who've come to me and say, listen, I want to be a Karaite, I want to be a Jew, I want to be an Israelite. And the first thing I always say is I say to them, listen, you need to make a distinction what you really want to do. Do you really want to be within that circle of the nation of Israel, which means that ultimately you're saying you want to disconnect from your identity as an American or as a Belgian or as a Mongolian or whatever your former nation is, and you want to be adopted by the nation of Israel. You want to assume your primary identity as an Israelite, and that also means ultimately moving to the land of Israel. It doesn't mean right now, because even not all the Jews are in the land of Israel, but ultimately means knowing in your heart of hearts and your soul of souls that like Ruth like Ruth followed Naomi back to the land of Israel, that you one day, soon, hopefully, and the way things are shaping up right now, it's going to be sooner rather than later, that you know your ultimate place, the place that you want to live and you want your children and grandchildren to grow up, is only the land of Israel, okay? And that you want to keep all of the covenant. So I call this like a black belt in Torah. If you want to be a black belt in Torah, then that is, and you're not born as an Israelite, that is a ger, okay? That is what that would be the analog to the rabbinical equivalent of doing Orthodox conversion. If you don't, let's say you still want to live in Arizona, or you still want to live in, I don't know, you don't want to live in London, and you love your identity as an Englishman, or you love your identity as American, you're a proud American, and you fly the flag, and you never want to give up your American identity, and you'd love to visit Israel, but you really don't want to live there, and you love the people of Israel, you love the Torah of Israel, you want to connect to Yahweh, but you don't want to really, really, really make a full 100% commitment, then that's a nilweh. You can still be an outside ally, supporter. You can still be connected to Yahweh. You can still be connected to Israel as a nilweh. And a nilweh means an adjoiner, or someone who accompanies, who joins Israel or accompanies Israel. Okay, but you're still outside of that circle of the nation of Israel, and that's another option that people are not presented with in rabbinical Judaism. They're either presented with 7 Noahide laws or rabbinical conversion. It's either like, one extreme or the other. And I say, no, that's not the way it has to be. You can be a nilweh, which really means much more of a connection to the nation of Israel than the rabbinical seven Noahide laws. But at the same time, it means not necessarily making that full 100% black belt level commitment to Israel, to move to the land of Israel, to disassociate your primary identity from your former nation, and to become a ger within that circle of the nation of Israel, which is also another acceptable option. And each person has to figure out for themselves which option is right for them. Okay. There you go. Exactly. In the farm. Excellent. Thank you, Whitey boy. I was going to actually quote that. It's Isaiah 56, right? I'll bring to my holy mountain, or all the foreigners who join themselves to Yahweh, to minister and to love the name Yahweh, to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath and do not, where to go, and do not profane it and hold fast to my covenant. Okay. So in my opinion, that is not speaking about a ger. That is speaking about what I'm calling a nilweh. And in fact, that's where I get the word nilweh from. Okay. From those verses. Okay. That's speaking about someone who wants to connect themselves to Israel, but they don't want to be part of Israel. Okay. All right. A lot more to say about this, but we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it now. Okay. All right. So we're in Leviticus chapter 10. So Nadav and Avihu died by fire that came down from God, basically from that same fire that same day. This is the 8th day of the inauguration of the Kohanim. Fire came down from heaven, or fire came down from where the glory of Yahweh was, and lit the lit. 1 second, please. 1 second. 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that distraction. So that's what we were speaking about. Okay, actually, I think maybe I'm going to move somewhere else. So that, 1 second. Let's see how we're going to do this. 28%. Give me 1 second here to work out something. No, I'll just continue. No, I'm going to move somewhere else. I'll be Okay, we're back. All right. Sorry about that. There's always destruction. I mean, what did I say? Destruction? No, I read some. No, there's always distractions. Is what I meant to say. All right. Let's try this again. Let me do a quick sound check. Can you guys hear me okay? Sound check. Can you guys hear me? Okay, excellent. All right. So we were in, I'm going to talk a little bit softer here because I'm in a more public area here. Okay, so we were in Leviticus chapter 10, and we saw that we spoke about the death of Nadav and Avihu by that same fire, the same fire that lit the altar of sacrifice on fire to kick off the first sacrifice, that first bull that was sacrificed as a fully burnt or as a Holocaust offering on the altar. We saw that that same fire now on that same day came down and burnt up Nadav and Avihu, the first and second born sons of Aaron, because they brought an unwanted or an unwarranted incense offering to Yahweh. Okay, and we spoke about how this is an example of adding to the Torah, and we spoke about last week about how adding to the Torah, this incident shows that adding to the Torah is as serious a violation as taking away from the Torah. And we said that perhaps the main crime of the rabbis, of the Orthodox rabbis, of the Orthodox world, the Orthodox Jewish world, is that they add to the Torah. They think they're being more pious. They think they are doing above and beyond for Yahweh. But we saw from this example last week that they're actually doing less. They are not doing more. Okay, Nadav and Avihu thought they were doing more. They thought by bringing this special incense offering, which was uncalled for, which was unwarranted, which was not part of the details of the sacrificial system, which we've gone through so extensively, or shall we say the way that the tabernacle is built, the way that the sacrificial system works, all of the stuff that we've gone through in the last half of Exodus and the beginning of Leviticus, and that will continue to go through it throughout Leviticus. It violated those very, very specific, those very, very detailed laws. So they were not, by adding to the Torah, they were not going above and beyond. Okay, there are methods, or there are ways that you can, if you want to go a bit above and beyond, you can do so within the rubric of the sacrificial system. We spoke about the peace offerings, or the communion offerings, as we're calling it, the shlamim, and that's the way that if you want to say thank you to Yahweh, or you want to say, hey, just appreciate all you've done for me, and things are going well, and you want to check in, then there is that you can bring a peace offering, usually translated as a peace offering. Okay, but you cannot just decide, hey, I'm just going to take some fire, throw it on the censer, and then light up some incense and walk around and say, here's an offering to Yahweh. This is in violation of the very, very specific details, which we've now spent a bunch of weeks going over on how to systematically or officially worship Yahweh within the temple area, within the tabernacle area. So instead of getting a 5-star review, instead of getting a gold star, instead of getting a pat on the back, they were killed. Okay, so we spoke about that last week. All right, so now we're going to go on. And we're going to pick it up in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 8. Okay. And this basically, up until verse 7, this concludes the narrative of the death of Nadav and Avihu. And when we pick it up in verse 8, now we're going to get some laws that are related to that narrative, or at least some laws regarding what the Kohanim are allowed to and are not allowed to do. So let me just switch over to the Hebrew here. And we're going to pick it up in verse 8. So we're in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 8. Okay. And we have Vaydaber Yahweh. Let me just make sure you guys are seeing the screen correctly, and you are. Okay. Daber Yahweh el Moshe el Aharon lemor. So this time Yahweh is speaking directly to Aharon, which shows that, as we've seen this a number of times before, that Aharon is a prophet. Yahweh is speaking directly to him. He's not speaking to Moshe, who then is speaking to Aharon. We've seen a bunch of times before. Sometimes he speaks to Moses, and then Moses will tell Aharon, or sometimes he speaks to Moses and Aharon. But here he's speaking directly to Aharon, because obviously, based on what just happened on this 8th day of after the beginning of the inauguration ceremony, the 8th day of the inauguration ceremony of the Kohanim, this has directly affected Aharon. His first and second born sons are dead, and their bodies have been removed, taken out of the camp, taken out of the area of the tabernacle. Okay. Verse 9, Gayin, V'shechar al tisht, ata u vonecha, itach, bivoachem el ohel mo'ed, willo, tamutu, chukat olam nedorotechem. So wine and liquor, strong drinks, strong alcoholic beverages. Al tisht, do not drink. Ata u vanecha, you and your sons, ita, along with you, or together with you, meaning you and your sons, included in this law. When you come into the tent of meeting. Okay, so again, let's bring up our map of the tabernacle, the one we've been using. Tabernacle. Oh, geez, why does this do this? Like this. Google. There we go. Google map of the tabernacle. And where's the one we've been using? There it is. Okay. Okay, so this is the tent of meeting. This is the courtyard of the tent of meeting, right? The tabernacle court. And this is the tent of meeting. So it says, do not enter into the tent of meeting. So I think we could take that at face value here. Okay. Meaning, do not enter into specifically the tent of meeting. Or it might mean by extension, do not enter into the entire tabernacle area within the courtyard. Maybe you could also make that claim, but we'll just go with the tent of meeting itself. Okay, v'lo tamutu, and so that you should not die. Chukat olam nedorotechem, this is an eternal law throughout your generations. Okay, so you cannot be in a state of drunkenness when you enter into the tent of meeting. You have to have your senses about you. You have to know what you're doing. There are very specific laws. There are very specific procedures to be followed. It would be like driving drunk, or it would be like flying an airplane drunk. Okay, I got my private pilot's license in 2017, and I can tell you, and anyone else who has a pilot's license, who knows about aviation, everything is procedure, everything is following rules, checklists. The ultimate pilot is actually, in a certain sense, doing very little thinking. He's just following procedure, and those procedures are very specific, and they apply at very specific times and in very specific ways. So maybe that's a good analogy. And if you're drunk, if you're on drugs, or if you're drunk, then you cannot follow those procedures effectively, and you're going to end up very potentially, if not crashing, then maybe doing some damage to your airplane. God knows what. Okay, but you could easily end up crashing if you are flying an airplane while you're drunk. Okay, so that is maybe a good analogy to what we are seeing here. Okay, we see that again, it's called usually in the academic texts, or it's called the cultic worship of Yahweh. It really means the systematic worship of Yahweh, that the laws are very specific. There's a lot of procedures to be followed. They have to be followed precisely, and you cannot do this effectively if you're drunk. And we already saw what the consequences were of not following procedure, as Nadav and Avihu did not. They did not follow procedure, and they are now dead. They died in front of their father, Aaron, on what was supposed to be a joyous occasion. Now he has 2 dead sons. Okay. Now, I've heard many commentaries state that this somehow implies that Nadav and Avihu were drunk, and that's why they brought this unwarranted incense offering. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's any indication of that. I guess one could make that case, but it certainly would be reading into the text rather than taking out of the text what is there. Yes, you could make the claim that why else would it be mentioning that you should not enter the tent of meeting if you're not drunk? That would imply Nadav and Avihu were drunk. I don't think so. I think these are just general laws, as we shall see, that are telling the Kohanim what is required, or things that are required in order that they are very specific in following the laws. 1 second, please. Okay. Let's see what Robert Alter has to say about that one out of curiosity. We'll bring up good old Robbie boy, and see what he has to say about that specific issue. So this is Leviticus 10. Okay, so the way I usually do it is I'll bring up another one, bookmarks, Robert Alter, and we'll go to that same page 923. Let's wait for a second for it to come up. 923. Okay. And where are we? Here it is. Wine and strong drink. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so it doesn't really say anything about it at all. Okay, and we're not going to hunt it down. So my opinion is this is not implying that Nadav and Avihu were drunk. It's just, again, it's a way to, the Torah works associatively. It's like Wikipedia. You're reading an article and you have a hyperlink, and you go to that hyperlink and you read it, and then maybe you go back to the previous article. So that's the way the Torah works. The Torah, remember, was mostly understood, or was mostly communicated orally. So by sticking to topics, or by one topic touching off another related topic, this was a way that the flow of the Torah could be kept logically and easier to remember by people who are hearing it in public readings. Okay, so now we're going to get laws that are related to what you should not do, what the Kohanim should not do when they're ministering in the temple. Okay, verse 10. Lahavdil ben hakodesh ben hachol, to make a distinction between the holy and the profane, the holy and the regular. It's exactly what we were speaking about before, right? We were speaking about how the Goyim, the other nations, they do not make good distinctions or any distinctions between the holy and the unholy. Saturday is just another day to them. It doesn't matter whether you're eating, a clean animal, or you're eating snake, or or rabbit, or God knows what. Okay, so here the distinction has to be made between the holy and the profane. But in this case, this is not speaking about a general distinction. This is speaking about with regards to the procedures in the tabernacle, right? Uben tameh, uben tahor, and wow, this is very important, between the unclean and the clean, the acceptable and the unacceptable, the kosher and the unkosher. And this is actually going to lead well into the next chapter, Leviticus 11, where we're going to be speaking about clean and unclean foods. But in this case, again, it specifically means with regards to the tabernacle, because one, as we shall see, we're going to study extensively the system or the idea of pure versus impure, clean versus unclean. One cannot be in a state of uncleanliness, cannot be tameh, when one approaches the holy things. So that's the relationship here, and is basically all scholars on Leviticus will point out. Okay, that you have the distinction between the kodesh and chol. Kodesh and chol means the holy. Kodesh is holy. Chol is profane or just regular. Again, kodesh would be the Shabbat. Chol would be the rest of the 6 days of the week. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just average days. Okay, and tameh is unclean or unacceptable. Tahor is clean or acceptable. And the rule is this: that if you're in the region of the Kodesh, and you're in the region of something that is holy, then you must be in a state of purity, or anything that's brought, anything that comes in contact with that area. Okay, and in this case, this is referring to the temple, the tabernacle area. So anything that comes in contact with the holy must be clean. Anything that is unclean can come in contact with the profane, with the regular, but it cannot come in contact with the holy. And if the unclean comes in contact with the holy, this is a big no-no. And as we shall see in Leviticus chapter 16, this is really what Yom Kippurim is all about. It's about atoning and cleansing the tabernacle for instances unintentionally, maybe even intentionally, where the where the impure has come in contact with the holy. So that's the rule. Pure or clean goes with holy. Impure or unclean goes with profane. And the holy cannot come in contact with the unclean. Okay? We'll talk about this a lot more as we go on. Verse 11, Lehorot et bnei Yisrael et kol hachokim asher diber Yahweh elehem biyad Moshe. And to instruct, in order that they should be able to instruct the children of Israel all of the laws which Yahweh spoke to them at the hand of Moshe. Okay? So these are the reasons that they should not be drunk. They should not be drunk so they don't make mistakes, and by mistake bring something that is unclean in the province of that which is holy, in the province of the tabernacle, and also so that they should be able to properly instruct the children of Israel. And again, this is mostly speaking about in regards to what the Kohanim are supposed to do, right? The procedures of the sacrificial system, the procedures of, let's say, we'll get to it, what's called leprosy, tzara'at, all of the things that the Kohanim are specialized in. They need to be able to properly conduct these procedures, and to ensure properly if they're drunk, just like you can't drive a car properly if you're drunk, and just like you can't fly an airplane properly if you're drunk. I'll be right back. Let me just see if I can go back to the other place where I was. Be right back. Okay, back to where I was, and hopefully that should be the end of the distractions. Let me just plug in again. All right. So let's move on. Verse 12. So we're in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 12. وَيَدَبَرْ مُوسَى el Aharon وَel Eleazar وَel Itamar. So Moses spoke to Aaron and Eleazar and Itamar. Eleazar and Itamar are the third and fourth born sons of Aaron. The first two, Nadav and Avihu, are now dead. So Eleazar and Itamar are basically going to take over the roles of Nadav and Avihu. Specifically, Eleazar is second in line, since he is now the eldest remaining. He moves up to the position essentially of, I won't say the firstborn, but he's now the eldest remaining son, and he will take over for Aaron when Aaron dies. Eliezer will be the next Kohen Gadol once Aaron dies. It was supposed to be Nadav, his firstborn. Nadav is now dead. Okay, Banav, Hanotarim. So Moses spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and Itamar, his remaining sons, his surviving sons. Chot mincha noteret mi'ishe Yahweh v'ichluha masot etzel hamizbeach. So take the grain offering. We spoke about the grain offering. The grain offering is in Leviticus chapter 2. It's one of the 5 basic types of offerings. Let's review the 5 basic types. Again, I'm going to give the colloquial translations. It's the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Okay, so this is a grain offering that was spoken about in the previous chapter as part of those 8-day celebrations, those eighth day celebrations. So take the remaining, or the portion of the grain offering that's remaining from the fire offerings of Yahweh. And again, these are grain offerings these are grain fire offerings. These are grain offerings in which a portion is thrown onto the altar of sacrifice. So they're called grain fire offerings, or they're called grain offerings, which are fire offerings of Yahweh. Ve'ichluha matzot etzel hamizbeach, and eat it, unleavened bread next to the altar of sacrifice. In other words, there's a portion of the grain offering that is supposed to be eaten by the Kohanim, and now Moses is saying you have to follow procedure still. You have to go ahead and eat them. Ki kodesh kodashim he, because it's holy of holies. We've seen this word thrown around a number of times for various types of sacrifices. There's a lot of discussion as to what this really means, but at any rate, the context here is clear that it has to be eaten. It can't just be left over. It can't be ignored, and it has to be eaten by the Kohanim in the tabernacle courtyard because it is holy. It is part of the sacrifices. Okay, and even though your first and second sons and your first and second sons, being Aaron, and your older brothers have died, you cannot ignore this portion of the grain offering that must be eaten by the Kohanim. Verse 13. And you'll eat it in a holy place. That generally always applies to within this tabernacle courtyard, within the courtyard of the tabernacle. You shall eat it in a holy place, because this is the law for you and the law for your sons regarding the fire offerings of Yahweh, because so I have been commanded. And if we were to go back, we're not going to go back now, but if we would go back to chapter 2 regarding the grain offerings, we'll see that this is exactly what's supposed to happen, that the Kohanim are supposed to take part of the grain offering, and they're supposed to take a portion, throw it onto the altar. Sometimes that's called the memorial portion. That's the way it's usually translated. And the rest they're supposed to eat in the holy area within the courtyard tabernacle. So that's what has to be done. Again, procedure has to be followed, even though their older brother / firstborn sons, first and secondborn sons of Aaron are gone. Okay, you cannot just ignore the fire offerings, the grain fire offerings, because of that. Verse 14, and the breast of the wave offering and the right thigh, the thigh of the elevation offering, you shall eat in a pure place. And pure place doesn't necessarily, in this case, mean in a holy place. It's different. It means in a place that is not that they cannot, that in which ritual impurity, which we'll talk about a lot again, cannot be contracted. So you, your sons, your daughters with you. Because so you, your sons and your daughters shall eat this this thigh, this breast and this thigh, because it is a law for you and a law for your descendants. That it was given regarding the slaughter offerings of, or the, I'll just translate as the peace offerings of the children of Israel. So again, if we were to go back to chapter 3, which deals with the peace offerings, then we would see this very specific thing, that the thigh, it's actually the right thigh, and the breast of the peace offering is not thrown on the fire. It's waved up and down or elevated, and then it's to be eaten by the Kohanim and their children. So again, what Moses is saying here to Aaron and to his remaining sons is you have to continue to follow the procedure. Peace offerings were brought, and those portions of the peace offerings have to be eaten. Okay. Verse 15, Shok tenuma v'chazeh tenufa al ishei chalavim yaviu lahanif tenufa lifnei Yahweh. So the thigh, which is to be brought as an elevation offering, meaning lifted up like this, the chazeh tenufa, and the breast, which is to be brought as a wave offering, usually understood as waving it up and down. Al ishei halavim yaviu, along with the fire offerings of the fats, they shall bring lanif tenufa lifnei Yahweh. They shall bring it to wave it as a wave offering, or to elevate it as an elevation offering before Yahweh. And this shall be this shall be a law for you and your sons, your descendants with you, as an eternal law, as Yahweh has commanded. Okay. So, and again, if we really wanted to, we could go hunt that down. I think I tried to do it last week and I couldn't find it. Maybe we'll take a moment to do it right now. Let's see if we can do that. So that would be Leviticus chapter 2. I'll just do the English. Oh, no, we saw it wasn't Leviticus 2. It doesn't mention it there. Let me see if I can find it this time. So we can get some context. I'm sorry, 2 is the grain offering. Leviticus chapter 3 is the peace offering. Let's see. Your offering is with goat. Okay, so it's not there. We saw. So let's now skip ahead to 6 is the guilt offering. No, 5 is the guilt offering. Yes, 5 is the guilt offering, and then the beginning of 6 is the guilt offering. And then we have some more laws. I think it might be here. 1 second. That's the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering. Let's go ahead to chapter 7. The guilt offering, the fellowship offering. Let's find it. 1 second. Anyone who touches something unclean, we share. Bring the fat together with the. Here it is. Okay, so we go back now to Leviticus 7. So this is giving further laws regarding the fellowship offering, which is the same as the peace offering, which we're translating as the communion offering. It's like, hey, God, I'm really happy. I want to say thank you, or I'm just in the mood to just express how much appreciation I have for all you do for me. Or keeping a vow. So these are all examples. What the heck is going on? Oh no, it's not freezing, is it? Why is it not? Okay, there we go. Okay, so in that case, let's go down here. So here we go. This is Leviticus chapter 7. So this is talking about the peace offering, which is now being referenced in Leviticus chapter 10. I'm sorry, not in Leviticus chapter 10. Where are we right now? Yes, in Leviticus chapter 10. Okay. What we just read. All of this stuff right here. Okay. So let's go back to Leviticus 7. I'm just going to read in the English to make it go fast. So then Yahweh said to Moses, say to the Israelites, anyone who brings a fellowship, a peace offering to Yahweh is to bring part of it as their sacrifice to Yahweh. With their own hands, they are to present the food offering to Yahweh. They are to bring the fat together with the breast and wave the breast before Yahweh as a wave offering. So that's what we're seeing here. The breast is waved as a wave offering. The priest shall burn the fat on the altar. As we know, the fat, which is also called the forbidden fats, are always burned on the altar. That is always Yahweh's food. But the breast belongs to Aaron and his sons. Okay, so the breast of that offering belongs to Aaron and his son. It's to be waved, which again means moved up and down, waved up and down. It's usually the way it's understood. And then it belongs to Aaron and his sons. You are to give the right thigh of your fellowship offerings, your peace offerings, to the priest as a contribution. So there's our right thigh, and there's our breast. The son of Aaron who offers the blood and the fat of the fellowship offering shall have the right thigh as his share. So the actual Kohen who's carrying out this, the bringing of, helping the Israelite, whoever's bringing this peace offering, this peace offering, is now he gets the right thigh. From the fellowship offerings of the Israelites, I've taken the breast that is waved and the thigh that is presented, and have given them to Aaron, the priest, and his sons as their perpetual share from the Israelites. Okay, so that's where we see it. In Leviticus 7, we see that for a peace or fellowship or communion offering, here they're calling it a fellowship offering, so we'll go with fellowship offering. So from the fellowship offering, the breast of the animal and the right thigh or the right leg, right thigh of the animal belongs to Aaron. He takes the breast and he waves it as a wave offering, and then he takes the right thigh and he presents it. And I think there, I have to look at it. The thigh that is presented, I have to look at in the Hebrew, but that's probably going to say is elevated. In fact, let me just look at that for 1 second. So that's Leviticus 7:34. Let me just look at the Hebrew there. So I'm just going to read. This is Leviticus 7:34. So the breast that is waved, breast that is presented as a wave offering, and the thigh that is presented as a okay, they're translating here as just a regular offering, but it could also be understood as an elevation offering because of the harim. But we'll just go with a regular offering. Okay, so these are the two parts of the peace offering that go to Aaron. The breast is waved as a wave offering, and then the thigh, the right thigh of the animal, is given as a contribution or as a salary to the Kohen who performed the actual offering. I've taken from the children of Israel, I've taken away from the children of Israel, mizivchei shlamehim, from their peace sacrifices, their peace slaughterings, and I've given them to Aaron, Kohen ulevanau, l'chok olam me'et ben Israel, and I've given to Aaron and the Kohen and his sons as an eternal law from the children of Israel. Because in other offerings, in other types of offerings, we saw that, or in the rest of the animal, it's the person who brings it, he eats it. But this portion, the breast and the right thigh, belong to the Kohanim, specifically to the Kohen who performed this fellowship or this peace offering. He gets the breast, which he waves as a wave offering, and he gets the right thigh of the animal as a donation, and he and his children may eat it. And that's exactly what we see here in Leviticus 10. And I'll read that again just in the English. And it starts here in 14. It says Leviticus 10:14. But you and your sons and your daughters may eat the breast that was waved. That's the breast that's waved, and the thigh that was presented. So that's what comes off of the peace offerings. For the peace offerings, Aaron gets the breast, it's waved, and the thigh is presented, and that belongs to Aaron. That belongs to the Kohen, who performed the actual sacrifice, and his children. Eat them in a ceremonially clean place. They've been given to you and your children as your share of the Israelites' fellowship offerings. Again, ceremonially clean place is distinct from a holy place. It means that it does not have to be eaten here within the tabernacle courtyard. It just has to be eaten in a place that has not been infected by ceremonial uncleanliness, which we'll get to and speak about a lot. Okay, they've been given to you and your children as your share of the Israelites' fellowship offerings. The thigh that was presented and the breast that was waved must be brought with the fat portions of the food offerings to be waved before Yahweh as a wave offering. This will be a perpetual share for you and your children as Yahweh has commanded. Okay, let's go back to the Hebrew here. I'm going to close out Leviticus 7. Okay, any questions, any comments? Okay, then let's go on. Let me bring this up in the Hebrew. Uh-oh, is it freezing? Please don't tell me it's freezing. No, it's good now. So let's go to Leviticus 10 in the Hebrew. Actually, I can do it much easier this way. And we're up to verse 16. So let's go up to the first half of the verse. وَإِتْ سَئِرَ هَخَتَاتْ دَرَشْ مُشَى وَهِنَي إِسْرَافْ. And the goat that was brought as a sin offering, Moses inquired regarding it, and behold, it had been burnt. Okay, so what's the problem here? So again, procedure has not been followed correctly. We'll talk about this in a second, but let's move on with the second half of the verse. وَيِقْصُفْ عَلْ إِلَازَرْ وَعَلْ إِتَمَارْ بْنَي أَهْرَونَ هَنُطَّرِيمْ لَمُور. And he got angry, he got furious he was fuming, literally. Ketzef means like foam. He was foaming at the mouth at Eleazar and Itamar, the third and fourth born, the two remaining sons of Aaron, the remaining sons of Aaron, and said, verse 17, Madua lo achatem et hachatat imakom kodesh. Let's go up to there. Why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy place? Makom kodesh. Whenever you see this makom kodesh, holy place, that means within the province of the courtyard of the tabernacle. So why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy place? Not the entire sin offering, the portion of the sin offering that you're supposed to eat. Ki kadosh kodeshim hi, because it is holy of holies. It's a very holy thing. Okay? Ve'ota natan lechem laset et awon ha'edah lechaper alehem lifnei Yahweh. So it is holy of holies, and Yahweh has given it. Yahweh is the implied subject here, and it was and he gave it to you. Laset et avon ha'edah, in order to carry the sins of the congregation, lechaper alehem, and to atone for them, lifnei Yahweh, to atone for them before Yahweh. Let's go on to verse 18, and then we'll explain what's going on here. Behold, its blood was not brought into the holy area. What's the holy area? The holy area is this area here. Okay, this is the tent of meeting. This is the holy area. Remember, as we've said many times now, the holy area contains 3 pieces of furniture. Here on the right, as you walk in, is the showbread. In front is the incense altar. On the left is the menorah. And then in here we have the Holy of Holies. That's where the Ark of the Covenant is. And that's where God, quote unquote, lives. Okay. So what was supposed to be done with this sin offering the blood from the goat of the sin offering was supposed to be brought into the holy area, and we'll go back and just cross-reference that for a second. And then it was supposed to be sprinkled 7 times on the parochet, on the curtain that separates between the holy area and the holy of holy areas. There's a curtain right here that's called the parochet, and it's supposed to be sprinkled either in front of or on. Not clear. I think it means on. And this was not done. So again, procedure was broken. But Elazar and Itamar are not going to die because the context is not the same. The circumstances are not the same. Obviously, they're in mourning. They may have screwed up a little bit. It wasn't malicious. It was just a mistake, a bad mistake, but still a mistake. Plus, if Elazar and Itamar get killed off, it's like a movie where, where the protagonist gets killed off, then who's going to take over for Aaron? He doesn't have any more sons, right? So maybe for practical reasons as well. Okay. Let's go on. And to most certainly eat it in the holy area, meaning within the province of the tabernacle courtyard, as I have commanded you. Okay, so what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to take this sin offering, this goat that was brought as a sin offering. They're supposed to drain its blood into a basin, into a bowl, take the blood inside the holy area, sprinkle it 7 times on the parochet, on the curtain that separates between the holy area and the Holy of Holies, and then there was a portion of it that they were supposed to eat, and they didn't do any of this. Okay, let's cross-reference this again. This helps us learn more about the details of the sacrificial system, about the 5 basic types of sacrifices. So let's see, what are we talking about? So this is a sin offering. We'll go to the laws for the sin offering. I'll just do it in English. Sin offering is in chapter 4, I believe. So a goat is being brought. So this is clearly, remember, there are 4 contexts for the sin offering. We've spoken about these 4 contexts a number of times. The first context is the Kohen Gadol. If the Kohen Gadol is to bring a sin offering, if he sinned inadvertently, and remember our definition or our translation for the sin offering is recompense from inadvertent transgression, or recompense from inadvertent sin, for inadvertent sin. So it's the Kohen Gadol, he brings a bull. A bull is the most expensive type of animal. It's big, right? It's male, it's big. If the entire Israelite community sins, then they take a young bull, basically a baby bull, a calf, and bring it. So when a leader sins, one second here. Leader sins, sin offering must bring as an offering a male goat. So when a leader sins, he brings as an offering a male goat. So that seems to be what's going on here. Now I'm missing something. Just one second here. Sin offering, put it on the horns of the altar of the burnt offering and pour out the rest of the blood on the base of the altar. Just give me one second here. מקום קודש כקודש שלהם ונתן לכם לשאת את עוון עדה לכפר ואין לא הובא את דמה אל הקודש פנימה ותאכלו אותה בקודש כאשר ציוויתי דבר אהרון אל משה הן היום הקריבו את חטאתם ואת עולתם לפני יהוה תקרנה את אותי כאלה ואחתי חטאת היום הייתה בעיני יהוה וישמע משה והייתה בעיניו. Okay, okay, so I have to admit I'm a little bit confused here, and that's okay. Won't be the first time, it won't be the last time, but something doesn't make sense here. So let me explain what I'm a bit confused about, and then maybe we can pick it apart and find out what's going on. So he's bringing a goat offering. So we'd have to go back and reference maybe we'll just skip ahead and maybe I'll just figure it out on my own. I don't want to take you guys too deep into. Okay, let me just see one thing here. So if we go back to chapter 9, let me just hunt this down a little bit, and if it gets too complicated, we'll just abandon ship and I'll just check it out on my own. All right, so in chapter 9, so this is on the 8th day, right? That's an 8th day. That's basically the kickoff of the sacrificial system. Okay, so here we go. So if we look at this 8th day, and this is all talking about these 8th day ceremonies, right? So Nadav and Avihu have just died, and apparently Itamar and Elazar and Itamar, who were supposed to continue doing the sacrificial system now that even though their two older brothers have just died right before them, have now screwed up a little bit. They've messed up the procedure a drop. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. On the 8th day, Moses summoned Aaron. This is talking about that 8th day before Nadav and Avihu died. Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel said to Aaron, "Take a bull calf for your sin offering and a ram for your burnt offering, both without defect, and present them before Yahweh. Then say to the Israelites, take a male goat for sin offering and a calf and a lamb, both a year old and without defect for burnt offering." So this is what we're speaking about here. Let me just see if there's any other time a goat is brought. Yeah, so this is talking. Okay, so now I see what's going on. Right. Okay, so 2 sin offerings were brought. The first was a bull calf. So a young bull, and this is one second here. Just cross-reference here. So a young calf. Again, remember there are 4 contexts for these sin offerings. So a young calf or a young bull is the second context. That's for the entire community. And what do we see here? So this first bull calf must be that second context. And then take a male goat. Then say the Israelites take a male goat for sin offering. So then all of the Israelites are to bring a male goat. So what is the male goat? The male goat is that third context. Here we see a male goat. Okay, and that's for a leader. So I'm a bit confused. I'm going to hunt this down on my own. I'm not sure exactly why. It seems like the first one should really be. Let's go back here. It seems like the first one, if it's for Aaron and his sons, that includes Aaron, it seems like it should not be a bull calf. It should actually be an adult bull. And the second one for all of the community, it seems like it should be a bull calf. I'm not sure why. I'm going to hunt it down on my own, but this is what's going on. So there are 2 sin offerings that were brought on that 8th day. The first was the baby male bull, the bull calf, and the second one was a male goat for all of Israel. Okay, so the details of which I'm a bit confused, but it doesn't matter. What's important here is this is now what Moshe is calling out Elazar and Itamar about, that they ignored the procedure regarding those two sin offerings. Okay, so in the first one, one second. מדוע לא חתם את החטאת במקום הקודש כקדוש קודשים ואותת נתן להם לשאת הן לא הובא את דמה אל הקודש. All right, I'm a bit confused, I have to admit. Why? Because it doesn't seem to me. I'll tell you exactly what the problem is here. This is speaking about that second goat offering that is brought for all of the children of Israel. But if we go back to Leviticus 4, then if it's for the entire community, it shouldn't be a goat, it should be a baby bull, and the blood of that baby bull should be brought into. I'm not going to bog you down with all the details. Something doesn't make sense to me here, but we're just going to move ahead, or else I'm going to go check this out on my own. Okay. So let's move on. Verse 19. Aaron el Moshe, and Aaron spoke to Moses. So Aaron responded to Moses. Okay, so Moses is calling out Aaron and his sons, his remaining sons, Eleazar and Itamar, for not following proper procedure regarding the sin offerings. And then Aaron responds, Aaron and Moshe, hen hayom ikrivu et chatatam wa et olatam lifnei Yahweh. So Aaron is now defending his two remaining sons, and he responded to Moses, behold, today they did sacrifice, they did offer their sin offering and their burnt offering before Yahweh. Watik rana oti ele wachati chatat ayom iti haita be'enei Yahweh. And tikrana oti, and they called me regarding these, and I ate the portion of the sin offering today. Is this okay in your eyes? So basically, Aaron is responding. So the criticism was that Eleazar and Itamar did not eat the portion of the sin offering in the holy place as they were supposed to. And then Aaron responds, I ate it. Yes, Eleazar and Itamar did not eat it, but I ate it. Is that okay in your eyes? And then Wa'ishma Moshe v'yitav be'enai, and Moshe says he listens and he says it's okay in my eyes. We're all squared away. So this is very technical, and there's some portions that, like I said, I need to track down and see exactly what's going on. There's some things that confuse me a little bit here because, again, I'm not sure which of that sin offering context is being spoken about here. It seems like two are being mixed together, but it doesn't matter. Basically, the bottom line here is that Aaron is calling out, Moshe is calling out Aaron's two remaining sons for not following proper procedure regarding the sin offering, the goat sin offering, and then they were supposed to eat a portion of it, and then Aaron responds and says, "It's okay. They didn't eat it. I ate it. We're good." Okay, so he's basically defending his sons, obviously telling the truth, but he's basically defending his sons. And then Moshe says, "Okay, we're good. You know, the issue solved. Nothing to worry about. Procedure was not broken." Okay. Okay. Again, very technical. So let's just put that aside. I'll check some things out regarding that on my own, but we'll put that aside. Okay. Now that takes us to the end of Leviticus chapter 10. It takes us to the end of the sin of Nadav and Avihu. The death of Nadav and Avihu were killed by fire from the heavens, from the glory of Yahweh. We spoke about how the priests are not allowed to carry out their procedures while they're drunk, because they have to distinguish between the holy and the profane, the clean and the unclean. We spoke about how the unclean cannot come in contact with the holy, and if it does, that's a big no-no. The clean or the unclean can come in contact with the profane, but the unclean cannot come in contact with the holy. In order for something to come in contact with that which is holy, it must be clean. A state of ritual cleanliness is often translated as. Okay. And then we spoke about how Moses commands Eleazar and Itamar to follow procedure regarding the offerings, that they were in the middle of that. Nadav and Avihu and Aaron were in the middle of offering when Nadav and Avihu were struck down. And then Moses calls out Aaron's remaining sons, telling them they actually didn't properly follow procedure. And then Aaron defends his two sons and says they did. We're good. And then Moses agrees. Problem solved. And that's the end of this, what was supposed to be a celebratory day, this 8th day, which started in chapter 9, the Yom HaShmini, the 8th day, but were turned into a day of tragedy when Nadav and Avihu were struck down, were killed by the fire of Yahweh for offering an unwarranted incense offering. Okay, so that sums up really Leviticus 9 and 10. And now we go on to Leviticus 11. We'll take a break for 5 minutes, but we're going to go on to Leviticus 11, which is kashrut, kosher and unkosher animals. Any questions, any comments? Yes, I have a comment. This is like being the child who was born after other siblings were born, but your mom died when you were born, so they had all these opportunities and you just don't. Okay. All right. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, but we'll go with that. Fine. At least I read it out loud. Any questions, any comments before we move on to Leviticus chapter 11? No? Okay, so let's move right on. I won't take a break. We'll just power ahead like Hillary Clinton. So we all want to be like Hillary Clinton, right? Just going to power on. So she's our role model. And we're going to go to Leviticus chapter 11. So Leviticus chapter 11, on its surface, it seems to be just speaking about kosher and unkosher animals, and it is. But actually, what it does is introduce us to the second major topic in the book of Leviticus. So the first major topic is sacrificial procedure. Procedure in the systematized, quote unquote, cultic worship of Yahweh. And we will get back to that, at least touch on it. So that really is, if we just summarize, that really is Leviticus 1 through through 8. No, through 7. Okay. So Leviticus 1 through 7 are the details of the sacrificial system. Leviticus 8 9 and 10 are the inauguration, the ordination ceremony of the Kohanim, and the beginning of the actual sacrificial, the kickoff of the actual sacrificial service, which continues for hundreds of years, ultimately until Nebuchadnezzar destroys the first temple, hundreds of years later. 700, no, more than that. 100, I think about 900 years later, approximately. Okay? So that's Leviticus 8, 9, and 10, including the narrative of the death of Nadav and Avihu. And now in chapter 11, we actually start the next major topic, and the topic that goes hand in hand with the details of the sacrificial system. And that's the idea of what is often translated as clean and unclean. Sometimes it's translated as pure and impure. Sometimes it's translated as ritually clean and ritually unclean. Sometimes it's ritually pure and ritually impure. But I'm going to render a definition of acceptable and disgusting, or acceptable and vile might be a better way of saying it. We're also going to see that when we speak about things that are unclean, specifically how a human being can attract or can contract this uncleanliness, it basically has to do with what I thought I invented this, but I saw actually other commentators mention the same thing. It has to do with kind of getting the cooties. So there are certain things which are just disgusting and that give you, if you remember back to when you were a child, gave you the cooties, okay, quote unquote. And these are not things that are just dirty. If you just touch the ground, you don't get the cooties, right? Remember back to elementary school when you gave someone when someone had the cooties and you just want to stay away from them, okay? That's not disgusting. You don't get the cooties from just touching the ground, even though the ground is dirty. If you step in a pile of dog shit, excuse my French, you don't get the cooties. It's disgusting and it smells, but it doesn't give you the cooties, okay? What gives you the cooties? If you step in a pile of, let's say, a discarded condom, okay, if you trip and fall and your face lands in an upside down or an inverted, an inside out condom, and I'm sorry to really get graphic here, but I really want to illustrate the point, that has dried up semen all over it from someone that was having fun in the park the night before, then that gives you the cooties. That's disgusting. And so that is really the idea of this concept of cleanliness slash uncleanliness ritual purity / there's ritual impurity, or something which is acceptable and something which is vile, something which is clean and something which is vile. The idea of something which is vile in the Torah is something which is beyond dirty and even beyond stinky and smelly and rotten. It's something that is so vile and so disgusting that it gives you the cooties. That's the only way I can explain it, and we'll see examples of this, specific examples of this. We will see specific examples of this, including the example that I gave regarding semen. So when semen comes in contact with another person, then that gives him the cooties, even if it's in the context of marital sex. It gives both the male and the female the cooties, and they are in a state of uncleanliness, being in contact with a dead human body, right? Would you rather, okay, think about it. Let's say you had groceries that you just bought from the store. Okay, you just bought a package of hot dogs, nice kosher, Hebrew national hot dogs in a package. And let's say they fell on the ground. Okay, it's still wrapped in the package. You're probably gonna just pick it up, wash it off, and eat it. Okay, let's say they fell in a pile of horse shit. Okay, pretty disgusting. But if it's in the plastic wrap, you might just say, okay, I just paid, I don't know how much a package of hot dogs is now with all the inflation in the United States. Maybe it's already $30. I just paid $30 for these Hebrew National hot dogs. It's pretty gross. It has horse shit all over it, but I'll just wash it off with soap and, I'll pretend like the incident never happened. Okay. But let's say it falls on a discarded condom left over from merrymaking in the park last night. Okay. There's no way in hell, even if you can wash it off with soap, you don't even want to touch it. You're not even going to touch it to take it inside and wash it off with soap. Or let's say it fell on let's say the mafia is active in where you are, like they were in the neighborhood I grew up in Queens, New York. Not that I ever found any dead body parts, but let's say your Hebrew National hot dogs fell on a hand, okay, a human hand that was rotting. Okay, I don't care how much soap and water you can apply to it, you are not going to want to eat those hot dogs, even if it's encased in plastic and even if you paid $30 for it. That's the idea of ritual uncleanliness. That's the idea of ritual impurity in the Torah. It's beyond dirty and it's beyond even disgusting. There's something so vile, something is so ick that you want no contact with it after it happens. Okay? So keep that in mind as we speak about clean and unclean, which is going to be the next major topic that we're going to cover in the book of Leviticus. But we actually start off not speaking about things that, well, we'll speak about that also, but not speaking about things that specifically make you unclean, okay, but things that are unclean, foods that are considered so disgusting that you as an Israelite, and by extension, Desiree, other people and other nations that want to emulate Israel in their ways, in their lives, would not even think of eating. So again, let's take a colloquial example. If you find a dead animal on the interstate, and I will refrain from Southern jokes this time, but if you find a dead animal on the interstate, okay, that's disgusting. There's no way on planet Earth that you want to eat that. If you see a snake crawling on the ground, then unless there's something seriously wrong with you, you don't want to eat that. If you see maggots that have completely infiltrated, an apple on a tree, the entire apple's filled with maggots, you don't want to eat that. These are things that are just objectively vile. They're disgusting. You want absolutely nothing to do with them. And that's the idea. Again, unclean is beyond just dirty. Unclean means something that's so vile, so disgusting, so repulsive that you don't want any contact with it. And here we're speaking about foods that are considered so vile that no Israelite in their right mind and no human being in their right mind, and we'll talk a little bit about how this applies to all human beings, would want to eat it. So it's not speaking specifically here about contracting uncleanliness. It's speaking specifically about foods that are so disgusting, so vile that no human being in their right mind would want to put those foods in their mouth. Okay? So That being said, this raises a question. So I have had arguments with one specific person who doesn't matter who, not in this group, for many, many years. And this is a common argument saying that it's cultural. There's some cultures who, pigs, there's some cultures who don't see pigs as unclean. There's some cultures who don't see snakes as unclean. I always like to tell the story of, and you could find this on the internet, Anthony Bourdain, who was, I believe his father was Jewish, so he was technically, by Torah standards, a Jew. I think his mother was not, if I remember correctly. Maybe it's opposite way, but that's what I seem to remember. So Anthony Bourdain has this one episode he had 2 TV shows. I don't remember which one. Don't ask me. He visits Vietnam. I always tell the story every year. Okay. And he goes to they invite him to some island where I guess it's nobles or some people preparing him a big meal. And they serve him some meat. And if you ever watched any of Anthony Bourdain's shows, you saw he pretty much ate anything. So they serve him some meat, and he asks them, as he typically did, what is this meat you're serving me? And they didn't speak very good English, so they said it was a squeezle. You can look this up on the internet. Just look up Anthony Bourdain, Vietnam. They said it was a squeezle, and Anthony Bourdain's like, squeezle? What's a squeezle? And that's it. That's the only word they can come up with in English. That's the only word they'd heard to translate this. And so Anthony Bourdain takes the meat and starts eating it, and you see he's eating it, and then he picks a porcupine quill out of his teeth. And then he looks at the camera and says, okay, now I know what a squeezle is. They had served him porcupine meat. Okay? So that's pretty disgusting. That is the kind of food that no one in their right mind is going to want to eat. And it's not a cultural difference. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, it's culturally different. The Vietnamese, they don't see anything wrong with eating a squeezle, with eating a porcupine. So that's fine for them. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. What's the difference? Each culture can choose what they consider clean and not clean. Okay? No. Put the brakes on that one. Yahweh, he's the one who created all the animals. He's the one who created us. And he is the one who also has the right to express what his sense of aesthetics are, what his sense of aesthetics is, his sense of what's clean and what's unclean, what's proper for human beings to eat, and what's not proper for human beings to eat. And it's not necessarily a choice that individual cultures can make. If you don't believe in Yahweh, if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe as creator, then yeah, you could say, well, it's like relative morality that you find in the West, right? Who's to say this is right and that's wrong? Each society chooses, what they think is right or wrong. And some societies may choose, when you turn 3 years old, you murder your mother. Who's to say, right? What's right and wrong? So just as that doesn't make any sense, so it doesn't make any sense that there's no objective aesthetic of what is appropriate for human beings to eat and what is not appropriate for human beings to eat. And if there's any doubt, we can go back all the way to, and this is for you, Desiree, to 2 places. I'll just stick with the English for a second. So we can go back to Genesis chapter 4, Cain and Abel. I'll just mention this. So we see here that Abel brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. And let's look at the Hebrew on that one. So that's Genesis 4:4. Four. Okay. Hevel hevi gam hu. So Hevel also brought an offering, mi bechorot sono, from the best of his flock, michel behen, and from their fats. Wa'isha Yahweh et Hevel ve'el minchato, and Yahweh accepted Hevel and his offering. So what's going on here? First of all, we see that Hevel does not bring a squeezle, does not bring pigs, does not bring something that is unkosher. He brings a kosher animal. He tends flocks. He's a shepherd, and he brings a sheep. Well, you could say, well, that just means that he's a shepherd, so he brought sheep. If he were a pig farmer, He would have brought pigs. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe so, but we're going to look at other verses as well. But here's another interesting thing. He also brings their fats. In other words, we see that already all the way back, right after the fall, right after the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, we have Cain and Abel, and we see that Abel already had some kind of internal sense of what was appropriate to bring Yahweh as a meat sacrifice, as a meat offering, and it just happens to be in line with the same types of meat or the same species of meat that are brought, that we saw in as part of the sacrificial system that we already saw now in the first 7 chapters of Leviticus, and it just happens to be in line with what is quote unquote kosher and what is quote unquote unkosher. He brings a kosher animal and he brings its fat. We've spoken now for weeks about the importance of the fats. The fats are the portion, or God's portion of the food. They're the food of the gods, not the food of the, the food of the God, not the food of the gods, but the ambrosia of the Torah, the food of the God, capital T, capital G, Yahweh. And already we see that Hevel already has an internal sense of what it means to bring the fats, sacrifice the fats, offer the fats to God of the animal, and to offer the best animals, and to bring what, by coincidence or not, happens to be a kosher animal. Let's move ahead now to Genesis chapter, is it 6? Oops, I'm doing the English. Or is it 5? Something tells me it's 5. No, 6. Okay, so we know, let's find it. Is it 7? Okay. The Lord said to Noah, so we know the story, right? We all know the story of Noah and the flood, of Noah's Ark. We know it since we're children. We learned his Bible stories. I learned in Hebrew school when I was, 5 years old. I already knew that story, as probably most of us did. And what we see, I'll read in the English and then we'll go to the Hebrew. Okay, Yahweh said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. Okay, so what is going on here? We already see that Noah had a sense of what is called a clean animal, and we'll look at the Hebrew, and what is called an unclean animal. This is Noah. This is long before the Torah is given. This is thousands of years before the Torah is given. Let's look at the Hebrew on that one. This is Genesis 7:2. And we see from all the clean animals. This is exactly the same word we encounter in the Hebrew in Leviticus 11. Okay? And let's find it. Let's see the first. There's something. Well, it first shows up here, but it's used many times throughout Leviticus 11. Here, unclean, clean. And it's that same word. It's tahor and tameh. It's that same Hebrew word that we see in Genesis 7:2 that Noah brought 7 pairs of onto the ark. Okay? So 7 pairs, male and female, of these kosher animals, and that's really what it means. That's what we call it now. Mina behema asher lo teorah, and from the unkosher animals, ishnaim ish ve'ishto. Bring 2, 1 male and female, 1 male and 1 female. Okay. So why would Noah need to bring? So first of all, we see already that Noah had a sense of kosher animals and unkosher animals. Hear that, Desiree? This is long before the Torah. This is long before the nation of Israel ever existed. And already Noah has a sense of what is unkosher and what is kosher. And in case there's any doubt whatsoever, the words kosher and unkosher do not appear in the Torah. In fact, they only appear one place in the entire Tanakh, and that's in the book of Esther, and that's not even meant to speak about food. But the Torah term for kosher animals is tahor, tehorah, habehema, tehorah. This means the kosher mammals, basically. And unkosher is called either tme'ah or lo tehorah, not kosher. So it's the same word, it's the same concept, it's the same idea. Noah already had an internalized concept, an internal concept of this idea of kosher animals, acceptable animals, and unkosher or disgusting vile animals that are unacceptable for human beings to eat. And that's already back in Genesis. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Now, yes, it's what we call kosher. It doesn't matter. Desiree, you're very argumentative today. I'm just using kosher because that's what we call it now. What the Torah calls it is tahor and tameh. Okay, tahor, acceptable, clean, pure. Tameh, unacceptable, vile, unclean, impure. I like to use the words acceptable and disgusting, or acceptable and unacceptable, or acceptable and vile. Okay, so that's what we have, but it's the same words. So let's now start going in the Hebrew through Leviticus chapter 11. Okay, so oh God Almighty, God, why are you so argumentative today? Disgusting in terms of eating it. Are you going to eat your cat? Are you going to eat your dog? Come on, Desiree, what's with you? I'm not talking about disgusting. I have 3 cats. I love them like they're my own children. I'm not talking about, but I wouldn't eat them. We're talking about what's acceptable to eat. Chapter 11, verse 1. So Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron, and notice he's speaking to Aaron. Whenever he's speaking to Aaron, this means that it has something to do with this concept, with something that has somehow to do with either the sacrificial system or the systematic worship of Yahweh in the tabernacle, or the issue of cleanliness and uncleanliness, kosher and unkosher. And this is, of course, what it has to do with here. Okay, verse 2. Dabru el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, lemor, to say, Zot haya asher tuchlu, mikol behema asher al haaretz. These are the animals which you're allowed to eat, which you shall eat, or which you are permitted to eat from all of the behema, is speaking about mammals. Behema specifically means mammals. We're going to see there are 3 basic types of well, more than 3, but we'll start with 3. That's going to be the mammals. It's going to be the birds, and it's going to be the fish. Okay, from all of the mammals that are on the land. So this section is going to speak about mammals. Kol mafreset parsa wishusaat shesa prasot. I'm sorry, shosaat shesa prasot ma'alat gera bebehema ota tochlu. So all of the animals that split their hooves, that have split hooves, literally split their hooves, b'shosat shesa, and that actually it comes to a complete split, they're disjointed, of their hooves are disjointed, and ma'alat gera, and that chew their cud, that are ruminants. Chew their cuds means they have multiple stomachs. They put it into the first stomach, digest it, and then essentially regurgitate it into the second stomach, and so on. So any animals that have split hooves, which are completely separated, which have a clear separation, and who are ruminants, who chew their cuds, among the mammals, otatochlu, those you may eat. So let's give an example of split hooves. Well, we'll get to it because we're gonna get specific examples. Okay, so those are the rules for the mammals. Essentially, what it means is most of the large ruminants, cows, reindeer, goats, deer, anything that is a ruminant and is a large animal is generally going to fall into these, or both generally going to fall into this or satisfy these two criteria, and will be acceptable to eat. Let's move on. But this you shall not eat. So now the Torah is going to flesh it out a bit, give specific examples. So this you should not eat from among those who chew their cud, who are ruminants, or have split hooves, and I won't even explain because it's going to give examples now. Et gamal, ki ma'ale gera hu uparsa enenu mafris. So you're not allowed to eat the camel because it is a ruminant. It does chew its cud, but it does not have split hooves. Let's look at the camel. Camel hooves. Okay, let's compare that now with, let's say, a cow. Okay, so the differences with a cow is that the hooves are completely split in half. Okay, whereas with a camel, they're kind of connected. You can't really see it here, but they're still kind of connected. There's not a space between the two hooves. Yes, they're split. Mifareset parsa, the hooves are split, but it's not a true separation between the two hooves. Where in the case of a cow, you can clearly see the space, right? You see that little grass there? There's a true separation. That's why the Torah also adds that it's not enough for them to have split hooves, but shasat shesa parasot, that they should also have a complete separation between their hooves, or between the two parts of the hooves. Let's see how Robert Alter deals with that one. So this is now Leviticus 3. And see if we can get his explanation. So first of all, he translates it as everything that has hooves and that has split hooves, bringing up the cud among beasts, this you may eat. And we'll go to 920. Oh, shoot. Okay. The inventory, this is what he says, the inventory of permitted and prohibited creatures and much of the language in which it is cast are quite similar to what one finds in the dietary laws in Deuteronomy 14. Jacob Milgram makes a plausible argument that the author of the laws in Deuteronomy is blah, 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 that we can skip all this. So not with the dietary taboos. Okay, so we'll just read this part. Absent from the parallel passage in Deuteronomy is the lengthy section here beginning with verse 31 that is concerned not with dietary taboos, but with impurity imparted by contact with the bodies of forbidden animals. That's a different issue. Okay, so it doesn't really speak about it here, but okay, about the issue that we wanted. Anyway, you get the idea. Let's move on. So the camel's off limits because of that. It doesn't have truly split hooves. It looks like it has split hooves, but they're not truly split. So therefore, it is tameh. It is disgusting. It is off limits. It is vile. I think vile is maybe vile or disgusting. It should be considered disgusting to you. Okay. Verse 5. Wa'et hashafan ki ma'ale gerahu uparsa lo yafris. Second. Right. Wa'et hashafan ki ma'ale gerahu uparsa lo yafris tamehu lachem. And then another example is given of the shafan. So what is a shafan? The shafan is often translated as hair, but it's really a hyrax. And if anyone is in contact with me on WhatsApp, there are two little animals on my WhatsApp picture, and those are hyraxes that we photographed in Ein Gedi a number of years ago. Two hyraxes that we saw climbing on the rocks. So what is a hyrax? This is a hyrax. It looks like a hair, but it's not. It's actually related to the elephant, believe it or not. That's one of its closest relatives is the elephant. So shafan is what it's called in Hebrew. I'll just tell a little true story about this word shafan. So one of the explanations, well, how many of you out there, by show of hands, we can't see any hands, have ever been to Spain? Well, maybe some of you have and some of you haven't. But if you've ever been to Spain and you've ever wondered where the word Spain comes from, one of the accepted or one of the etymologies, this is not just kind of taken from nowhere. This is actually one of the accepted etymologies for Spain. Well, Spain is in Spanish is not Spain, it's España. She happen to be very close to there right now and have been for the past couple of years. España is named after the Latin, the Roman name for that territory, for the Iberian Peninsula, which was the territory of Hispania. Some believe, many believe, come from the Phoenician word. Shifanim. Hispania Shifanim. Shifanim means the island of Hyraxes, or island. Sometimes they'll call it the island of sometimes they'll translate it as a Coney, meaning Coney Island. So the Iberian Peninsula. Let's look at the Iberian Peninsula. So, and that's not good. Let's do Google Maps. One second. So there's the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, basically up to here. This is the border between Spain and France. That's where the Pyrenees are. The Pyrenees basically form the border between the Iberian Peninsula and the rest of Europe and France, essentially. And this Iberian Peninsula was settled by the Carthaginians. Where's Carthage? I visited Carthage in 2018. Carthage is right near Tunis, the capital of Tunisia. And without getting into the whole long story, our friend Yarden, who's here, could probably get into it in detail. But to make a long story short, the Carthaginians, Carthage was essentially the leading city of the Mediterranean for many hundreds of years until it was ultimately defeated by Rome in what's called the Punic Wars. But the Carthaginians, they colonized all around the Mediterranean, including the Iberian Peninsula. In fact, they colonized all the way down to the coast of Morocco, to a city called what is now called Essaouira. Right there, I've actually been to Essaouira. Essaouira had a large Jewish community, and this was a Phoenician colony back in the day, where they exported Carthaginian colony, where they exported their main, I should say Phoenician colony. It wasn't necessarily only Carthage. Okay, but the Phoenicians, their main product was called Tyrian purple. I'm going to get off track, and I'll get into a whole long thing. To make a long story short, the Carthaginians, or the Phoenicians, the leading city of which at the time I'm speaking about was Carthage, they colonized the Iberian Peninsula. And when they got there, first of all, they thought it was an island, which I guess makes sense. If you go across here, you wouldn't know that the Pyrenees all the way up here, unless you mapped it out, are connecting it to another portion of Europe. So they thought this was an island, so they called it island. And when they got there, they saw a whole bunch of these hyraxes, these conies. So this is the original Coney Island. This is the original Coney Island. Island in Phoenician, which is very similar to Hebrew. It's a Semitic language, very similar to Hebrew, is E, just like it is in Hebrew. And hyrax, as we see here in Leviticus chapter 11, is shafan. So in Phoenician, the word is Shifanim, island of the hyraxes, or island of the conies, Coney Island, Hashfanim. That became under the Romans who conquered Carthage in the Punic Wars. That became Shifanim, became Hispania, that became España, and that in English is Spain. So it is believed by many scholars that, or one of the accepted explanations for the etymology of the word Spain, is the island of these little creatures here, the Shafan, the Coney, or the Hyrax, these little guys right there. Interesting? I think so. Okay, let's go on. So these little guys, they also have a problem. They, even though they're small, and this is perhaps why they're being brought here as an example, because we brought one large animal, that was the camel, and now we're bringing one small animal, that's the hyrax. Okay, but they also chew their cud. Actually, they do something similar to chewing their cud. It's not technically chew their cud, but it's close enough, or it was believed that they chew their cud. So they chew their cud, but they do not have split hooves, and therefore they are unacceptable. They're vile. They're disgusting. They're considered to be considered disgusting for you to eat. Okay, and let's even look at the hyrax. You can see their little split hooves. Okay, right? But I'm sorry, you can see you can't see they chew their cud. You can see that their hooves are split like the camel, but not completely separated like the cow. Okay. Okay. So it doesn't doesn't go all the way. All right. Verse 6, so the arnevet is usually translated as the rabbit. Let's see if they translate here, the hare. And every single species, whether it's plant or animal that's mentioned in the Torah, with few exceptions, it's not 100% clear what specific species it's speaking about, but we'll just go with the translations here, the NIV translations. So this is hare. So the hare, so the hare also chews its cud, but it does not have split hooves. It is therefore considered unacceptable, disgusting, vile for you to eat. Okay. Okay. Now we get to the pig, the poster boy of unkosher food. Verse 7, et hachazir ki mafris parsa hu v'shasa shesa parsa. So it has completely split hooves. V'hu gera lo yigar, but it does not chew its cud. Therefore, it is considered to be considered disgusting, off limits, vile, unacceptable for you. Let's look at the pig. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong pig. A little tribute to Donald Trump. Let's look at an actual pig. Okay. Pig hooves. Okay, so we could see that the pig has completely separated hooves, right? They're completely separated. There's a space, there's a gap between the parts of the hoof, but it doesn't chew its cud. So it is unclean. So this is now what the Torah so typically does. It's giving the law right here. And then it's giving examples to flesh out exactly what the law means. So there's no questions. So that's the pig. So mi bisaram lo tochelu, u beniv latam lo tiga'u, tmeim hem lachem. So you shall not eat their flesh, and you shall not make contact. You shall not touch their dead bodies. So what does that really mean? Okay, we can talk about it later, but it's two different things. So first of all, you're not allowed to eat them. That's easy. Okay, nobody has to go eat a pig unless you're starving in the desert, as Desiree pointed out correctly. But sometimes you just got to touch the dead body of a pig. I don't know. Let's say a pig wanders onto your farm and dies. Well, you're not just going to leave it there. So we're going to see distinctions between what happens when you touch a dead body, which actually makes you ritually impure, and eating, which it's not clear if it even makes you ritually impure, but the ritual impurity is that it should be considered at that point disgusting to you. So it's basically two overlapping things. We're going to, as I heard someone say this week, bracket that. I'll use that phrase from now on. We'll put that aside and we'll revisit it. What are the consequences, or what are the punishments, as Desiree maybe asked, for what are the consequences of eating an unclean animal, an animal that is considered off limits, vile, disgusting, and touching the carcass of an unclean animal? And certainly the first one is voluntary, unless you're being, waterboarded and force-fed in a CIA detention camp or something like that, you can make a choice, or unless you're in the desert starving to death, you can make a choice about what foods you put in your mouth. But you can't always make a choice about what dead bodies, what carcasses of animals you come in contact with. Okay, so we'll talk about those two distinctions afterwards. Okay, now we get to the fishies, little fishies, which I've come to believe, and I think it's pretty clear to me now, that the restriction on eating blood does not apply to fish or lower animals, some of which don't even have blood. It only applies to mammals and birds. This is something we've touched upon before, and I think now it's crystal clear to me. There's a blanket prohibition in the Torah that you should not eat the blood of an animal, but I now come to believe, and I think it's very provable in the Torah, that this is speaking about mammals and birds and doesn't include fish, insects. I don't know if insects have, yeah, some insects have blood, reptiles, maybe reptiles, because reptiles are in between fish and birds, but it certainly doesn't include fish. So you don't have to worry about eating blood of fish. And I'm not talking about all marine life, because as we know, I did my master's degree in marine biology, finished it in 2022, and my area of study was sperm whales. We know that they are not fish, they're mammals. Okay, so obviously you cannot eat the blood of a sperm whale. Okay, I'm talking about specifically fish and lower level sea life, such as crustaceans and so on. Okay, but here we're basically talking about the fishies. Okay, or shall we say seafood. So this is what you're allowed to eat from that which swims in the water. And maybe this includes all marine life, because it's going to specify which ones you can eat. Okay, anything that has a snapir is fins, and kaskeset is scales, so fins and scales. That's the criteria. If they have both fins and scales, then you're allowed to eat them. B'mayim, in the waters, and then it specifies specifically the seas, the oceans and seas, and in the rivers. So it doesn't matter whether this is basically salt water and fresh water, what it's speaking about. Nachalim would also include lakes and streams. So whether it's salt water or fresh water, otam tochlu, those you may eat. So wherever you find marine life, if it has fins and scales, you're allowed to eat it. So let's take some examples. Catfish. Okay. There's a catfish. Has fins, it doesn't have scales, it's smooth. Shark, which where I live, they're constantly serving I go to a university sometimes to get some work done, and they're constantly serving shark called raya, and it's disgusting. Shark, fins, no scales. Okay. What animals have scales and no fins? I'm not sure, actually. I'd have to look it up. Let's ask Rabbi Google. Fish with scales but no fins. Okay, are there fish with have scales with no fins? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. I guess that one. That has fins. That one. Does that have scales? I don't know. Any rate, whatever. So, those are the criteria, and of course that includes anything else that's in the water. So, shrimp. Okay, you got to be out of your mind to eat that. That's just objectively disgusting. It's, as I always call them, they're sea maggots. Lobsters, that's a giant sea cockroach. Okay, any mammals that are in the sea, dolphins, whales, dugongs, seals, right? All off limits. The only thing that swims in the sea that you're allowed to eat are standard fish with fins and scales. There is a list. There are a number of lists. So kosher fish list. If you're ever in doubt, and I use this all the time, Chabad does one, and there are other ones as well. They will give you a list of fish that are kosher. So if you go to a restaurant and it says sea bream smothered in a delectable sauce of garlic and roasted, I don't know, roasted tiddlywinks, and you don't know if sea bream is kosher or not, you can just Google kosher fish, and you'll come up with one of these lists. And actually, some of these lists they have uh, they have the names for these species in other languages, so that's really helpful. Yeah. There's also a website. What is it called again? Oh God, I used it all the time when I was taking my marine biology classes, and for some reason it escapes you right now. Oh geez, hold on one second. Fishbase. There it is. So Fishbase, and there are different ones, but here, I don't know. This one is SE. I don't know what SE is. I'll just use this one. So if you go to Fishbase, Fishbase DE is the one we were usually using. That one. So let's say, I don't know, common name is, you can put in the scientific name. So we'll put in sea bream. Okay, and you can even choose languages here. So let's say you are in, I don't know, it's all English. Country. Whoa. SQL exception. Oh my. Get back here. Anyway, you get the idea. You can fool around with it, but it gives specific. So let's go with sea bream. Okay, search. Okay, sea bream. So here you can get a picture of that specific fish and all kinds of information about it. And where is it in? It has its names in different languages. I can't find out where it is right now, but you can see very clearly here that it has fins and it has scales. So if you're in a country and on the menu you see some type of fish and you don't know what it is, you can go to Fishbase, type in that name in any language. If you have the scientific name of the fish, then you can type that in and you can get information about that fish. So that's a very useful site. It's fishbase.de. Keep in mind, I know from personal experience that if you're in different countries, they don't always know what type of fish they're using. And they may say they're using a certain type of fish, but it might actually be another type of fish. So you really got to be careful. And if you're in a country and you can actually see the fish before they cut it up and put it on the plate, then it's always preferable, because they could give you a name in a different language. Let's say dourada in Portuguese, which is usually kosher fish, but maybe they're not using dourada. I think dourada is actually sea bream, and they could give you, it could actually be a different type of fish, or they could think they're using that, but they're not using that. So you really got to be careful. But those are some good resources. Okay, those fish lists. Oh, did we freeze up? Here we go. I think we're frozen. I think I have to restart the computer. Either fish list or fishbase.de. Okay, I think we're frozen. I'm gonna have to start the computer. I'm gonna have to restart the computer, shut it down. You know the drill by now. This happens for some strange reason once every Torah study. So I'm gonna shut down the computer and I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sound check? Can I get a sound check? I'm going to go for about another, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, and then I'm going to stop it for today. Sound check. Hello. Sound check. Sound check. Let me do this in the meantime. Guys, can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me? Can someone give me a Y or a yes? Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, so fishbase.de and the various lists of kosher fish are excellent resources. Let's go on. Verse 10, so Leviticus 11:10. Just do the first half of the verse. So anything that doesn't have both fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, meaning in salt water, fresh water. The seas includes ocean seas, and the rivers will also include lakes, streams. So basically, salt water, fresh water. We call sheretz hamayim, and we call nefesh chaya asher b'mayim. From anything that swarms, sheretz is a very specific word, which we're going to encounter a number of times in this chapter. Okay, so anything that swarms, crawls, they just translate as move here. I don't like that translation. So anything that that swarms in the sea, we call nefesh chaya asher b'mayim, and any type of animal. And this again, now this is going to include everything. It's mammals. It's going to include crustaceans. It's going to include any type of animal that might be living in the sea. Asher b'mayim. All right. Let me just get it. So here, sheretz, they translate here swarmers or swarming things, collective swarmers, swarming things. See if they give some examples. Small reptiles and quadrupeds, weasel, mouse, lizard, insects. Okay, you get the idea. So in the sea, I don't know, what are some animals that swarm? I guess fish that go in schools. But they are unkosher fish. Some mammals travel in groups and pods. So anything that swarms, meaning there are a bunch of them traveling together in the sea, among any of the animals, or maybe this in this case, yeah, I guess it just means maybe move is actually, they're just using sheretz. Okay, yeah, move maybe is actually a better translation now that I think about it. Because sheretz, in this case, is really referring to everything that's in the sea. Anything that's in the sea, I think it's saying is considered swarming in the sea. So anything that swims around, let's go with swim instead of swarm. Anything swimming in the sea, because anything in the sea is pretty much going to swim in one way or another. Well, that's not true either. Some things are stationary, but let's go with swim. Anything that swims in the sea, any type of animal which is in the water, sheketzi hem lechem. It is to be considered an abomination, a disgust. Okay, sheketz also is a very specific word. They usually translate as abomination. I don't really like that. There we go. Detestable thing, detestation. That's better. So anything that does not have fins and scales, and it's in the sea or in the either saltwater or freshwater. If it's a sheretz, and I think this is intentionally, this is meant to be, it's more than alliteration. Sheretz and sheketz. It's not quite a rhyme. I don't know what the technical term would be, but sheretz sounds like sheketz, as you can see, right? So I think it's intentional. If you read it in the Hebrew, and remember, Hebrew is meant to be very literary, because it's more descriptive and easier to remember things when they're literary. So let's start from here, okay? So it's, and people often will get these two words confused. Sheretz, which means, again, in this case, to swim, swarm, and shekets, which means a detestable thing. So anything that swims in the water, any type of animal that swims in the water that does not have fins and scales, shekets heim lechem, it is a detestable thing to you. It is to be a detestable thing to you. This also gives us a bit more of an insight as to the idea of clean and unclean, of tameh and tahor, that these unclean, these unkosher animals are considered detestable. They're considered vile. They're considered inappropriate. They're considered disgusting. Okay, the word here shekets means disgusting, detestable, vile. Okay, and that's the Torah's understanding of quote unquote unkosher or unclean animals. They are disgusting. They are inappropriate. They're so gross. They're so inappropriate for humans to eat that if you eat it, it's considered a disgusting thing. Just like you wouldn't eat a dead snake off of the side of the road, or even a live snake, going through the grass. So it's the same thing. And if you look at, there are some pretty ugly sea creatures. And if you look at some of them, even more of the common ones, again, shrimp, eel, octopus. People in the West eat this where I am right now. They eat this all the time. Shrimp, octopus is huge where I am, where I won't be for much longer, by the way. And eel, what else? Shrimp, lobster. These are disgusting. Who in their right mind would put that stuff in their mouth? If you're an animal, okay, animals don't make distinctions between clean and unclean foods. They'll eat anything. Okay, our cats will eat pretty much anything, right? But we as human beings we're different. We're not animals. We don't just stick any old thing in our mouth. We're supposed to make distinctions between things that are appropriate for us to eat as human beings and things that are just objectively disgusting. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're an Israelite, a Jew, or not. Every human being should have this internal sense of things that are appropriate to eat, that are acceptable to eat, and things that are disgusting to eat. And we saw that already back in Genesis chapter 4 regarding Abel's sacrifice. And we saw that with Noah, who already had a concept of kosher and unkosher animals. And this is why I say that the 7 Noahide laws, getting back to the talk at the very beginning, the 7 Noahide laws don't really, oh my God, Desiree, are you ever going to, I don't know, ask God, okay? God said the horse is not appropriate for eating. So don't ask me. I'm not God, okay? Go ask him. Oh my God. Jesus, you are really in an argumentative mood today, okay? So go, I don't know, meditate, go sit out in the grass, have a nice long talk with God and ask him why he thinks the horse is disgusting. I didn't make it up, okay? Oh, God. All right, I'm not even responding anymore. Okay, so, right. What were we saying before I so rudely interrupted myself? Right, so this idea that they're objectively disgusting things that all of the world should be aware of and should avoid, but they don't, because once again, the non-Israelites, they don't have the, shall we say, sensitivity, or they've lost the spiritual sensitivity. We saw that Noah had it, we saw that Abel had it, but they've lost as the world became more and more corrupt, as it moved farther and farther away from Yahweh. Then they lost this sensitivity, this, if you want to call it God sensitivity or spiritual sensitivity to many things. That's why in some countries they murder, steal, rob. I'm talking about the United States of America, like New York, right? And they've lost sensitivity to what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what's right, what's wrong. They've lost sensitivity to the distinctions, to the distinctions between right and wrong, holy and profane, that we spoke about at my opening monologue. They've lost the sensitivity to these distinctions. So they eat anything. In the country that I've been living in for the past 4 years, the things they put in their mouth are just disgusting. Pig, squid, and octopus are huge. Shrimp is huge. The list goes on. And each country you go to, you see that these various societies, they've lost their sensitivity as to what is appropriate for human beings to eat and what is not appropriate for human beings to eat. They've reverted essentially to being animals, because cats, dogs, they'll eat anything, right? My cats will eat pretty much anything, okay? If they find a dead bird, they'll eat it, okay? If they find, a grasshopper, well, we're actually not eat grasshoppers, we'll get to that, but cats will eat anything. Animals eat anything. They don't have a concept of what's appropriate to eat and what's not appropriate to eat. But we human beings are supposed to have a concept as to what's appropriate to eat and what's not appropriate to eat. Humanity, as it became more and more, as corrupted its way more and more throughout the years, lost that native, that innate understanding. They lost that sensitivity. And then what happened is that Yahweh came along and he said, listen, I gave up on all of humanity. That's what the flood story is about. I'm going to choose one branch of humanity, starting with Abraham and then going through Isaac and then going through Jacob. And I'm going to take them and I'm going to give them these laws that really I originally wanted to give to all of humanity. So that they are going to now encapsulate, they're now going to be in contract in a do or die covenant, a do or die contract with me, Yahweh. You know what I mean, right? With me, Yahweh, to keep these laws because all of humanity was not able to. That experiment failed. Okay, so they're going to be in a specific contract, a specific covenant to keep these laws, and by doing so, they will act as a model society for all of the rest of humanity. Who originally I wanted them to keep all or many of these laws. All of the rest of humanity can look to as a model society and hopefully follow it. And again, with regards to kashrut, we actually see that for all of the West's typical criticism of Islam. If you go to Islamic countries, you will see that they have a concept. It's not exactly the same concept as in the Torah, especially among the Sunni. They will eat seafood, and different countries and different communities do slightly different things across the Islamic world, but they do have a basic concept of kosher and unkosher, which they call halal, right? Halal and haram. So halal is permitted, haram is unpermitted. Halal is kosher, haram is unkosher. So if you go into a halal shop, it means that it's quote unquote Islamic kosher. Okay, so that already, since the Muslims are now how many billions? 1 billion, 2 billion? I forgot what we're up to. 1 billion people, I think it is. So that shows that 1 billion, so 1/8 of the world's population has a concept of this basic concept that was lost by humanity. And that is the idea of clean and unclean, kosher and unkosher, acceptable and detestable, vile or disgusting animals. And this shows that where did the Muslims get it from? Well, again, Islam is a derivative religion for all its problems, and it has a lot of problems. It is a derivative religion of Torah. They got it from the Jews. They got it from the Israelites. So there is a classic case, case in point, actual in action application of exactly what we as Israel, we as being in covenant with Yahweh to follow the laws of the Torah are supposed to do. We're supposed to set an example, and then other nations are supposed to come along and say, that makes sense. Israel is a wise and understanding nation. This great nation is wise and understanding. And believe me, the Muslims, even to this day, are not haters of the Jews. Yes, there are problems, especially in the land of Israel, but the Muslims actually, my experience, my personal experience, and from history, not always. It's always been very problematic, obviously, but much of Islam throughout its history has had, I would say, mixed feelings, but overall, great respect for the nation of Israel. Not so much for the Jews in their day-to-day living, but great respect for the concept of the nation of Israel. And so the Muslims have learned from the nation of Israel this idea of acceptable and unacceptable foods. Okay, and that's their halal system, which is similar to kashrut. Okay, so let's go on. Ch.10 lechem. So this is speaking again about what fish, what sea creatures are acceptable and which are not. And it is disgusting for you, or it is a detestable thing for you, and it should be a detestable thing for you. Okay. In other words, it's repetition. We know repetition means emphasis in the Torah. So ch.10 lechem or ch.10 lechem. So it is disgusting to you, and it shall remain disgusting to you. Emphasis. Repetition is emphasis. You shall not eat of their flesh. You shall not eat of their flesh, and their carcasses you should consider detestable. So very similar to the closing phrase that we saw regarding the mammals. Let's find it. Verse 8. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses. They are disgusting or unclean to you. We'll go with disgusting. And here, regarding the sea creatures, Mibasram lo tochelu, so it's the same words exactly. You shall not eat of their flesh, same as the beginning of verse 8. Ve'ed nivlatam tishakitsu, and you shall find detestable, you should consider detestable their carcasses. Okay, so here you shall not touch their carcasses, they are unclean to you. Here they shall be considered detestable. So this idea of shekets, of something that's detestable, is specifically, let's see, does the word even appear again? Shekets in the rest of, let me do it this way. Shekets. So Leviticus 11, 12, 11, 13, 11. Yeah, it appears a bunch more times. Okay, so let's keep this word in mind. It's now been used specifically with the sea creatures, but not with the mammals. Shekets. So what is disgusting about the sea creatures? Well, if you've ever looked at some of the creatures in the sea, they could be pretty gross. Okay, and let's see where else as we go on shekets is used. Okay, and sheketsu, you shall consider them detestable. You shall despise them or consider them vile. Okay, and then summary sentence: Kol asher en usnapir v'kaskeset b'mayim sheketz hu lechem, and more emphasis, more summary, more repetition. Really, bring it all home. Anything that doesn't have a fins and scales, that lives in the waters, fresh or salt water, salt or fresh waters, sheketz hu lechem should be considered a detestable thing to you. Okay, so that ends the fishies. We'll go on to the flying thingies. So oath in this context doesn't, let me just see before I say something stupid. No, I guess here it does. Yeah, we're going to get also to flying insects. This means specifically the birds. Okay, verse 13. What so here we have again that shekets, these are the things you should consider detestable from among the birds. Lo ye'achlu sheketzim, they shall not be eaten, they are to be considered disgusting, to be considered detestable. And then check in here and see if there are any. Okay, and then we get a list of species basically. And again, as I mentioned earlier in this study, and as I've mentioned in earlier studies many times before, that whenever you get down to species, nobody really knows exactly what the species is that's speaking about. Some they know more than others. There have been entire people who've spent their entire academic careers trying to decipher what the Hebrew animal names or Hebrew plant names, what species it is referring to. So we're just going to go here without getting into all of that, that imbroglio, is that a word? Oh, I think that word. Imbroglio? Imbroglio. I may start using it. Extremely confused, complicated, or embarrassing situation. I don't know about that. Okay, we'll go with imbroglio. Why the heck not? Without getting into that imbroglio, we're just going to give the translations that appear here. Okay. So at the nesher, so the nesher is the eagle, as in on eagle's wings. I shall lift you up on the pinions of eagle's wings. We saw that in Exodus. So nesher is the eagle. The peres is translated here as the vulture. Right? So we're getting different species names. This is translated as the buzzard. Okay. The nesher vet the peres vet onia. So we have the eagle, we have the vulture, and we have the buzzard. Well, we can already see things that are similar, and this has of course been pointed out by many people, many commentators, that these are all birds of prey, or specifically, what do they call them? I think carrion swoopers or something like that. Whoa. Videos. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, you get the idea, right? These are all birds that swoop down and take either live or dead animals from out of they swoop down out of the sky and carry off live or dead animals. Okay, they're birds of I forgot what you call them, but you know what I mean. Okay, So wa'et hada'ah. So da'ah is translated here as kite, K-I-T-E. Wa'et ha ayah. That's translated here as falcon, limina. Wa'et kol orev limino. And all of the ravens, and we get the word raven very clearly. The modern Hebrew English word raven comes from the Hebrew word orev. Orev is one of the two types of birds that Noah let off the ark to test if the waters had receded. So orev and the raven. So again, these are all birds of prey, birds that swoop down and carry away their prey. Wa'ed bata ya'ana. So bata ya'ana is translated here as the ostrich. Et tahmas, the short-eared owl is how they translate it here. What the shachaf, the seagull, and that's what it is in modern Hebrew. Shachaf is seagulls. What anetz, the hawk. Leminehu. What akos, translated here as little owl. What shalan, shalach, translated here as fisher owl. What the yanshuf, the screech owl. So definitely, Torah is definitely not into owls, not into carrion swoopers, I'll call them. So we get the idea. But again, it's specific species, and you could draw general conclusions from these species, and some people certainly have. Like, how do you know the chicken is kosher or not? I think the great Meir Rechavi, the greatest Karaite Chacham in the history of all of Karaism, has written his flagship article on why the chicken is kosher. So you can go read that. But you can definitely draw conclusions, right? You can maybe generalize, because how do you know of another species that isn't mentioned here? I mean, are we assuming that every other species is kosher? And I don't think the case is that is the case. I think that we can learn from this that all birds of prey, carrion swoopers are unkosher, whether they're listed here or not. But that's a long discussion, which we won't get into right now. Wa'et hatin shemet, translated here as white owl. Wa'et aka'ah, jackdaw, whatever that is. Wa'et raham, carrion vulture. Wa'et hasidah, and that's a stork, even in modern Hebrew. Et anafa, heron. Lemina, wa'et. And by the way, it says lemina, so this means according to its type. So this may imply anything like it. Here they translate this after its kind. Wa'et the duchifat, that's the hoopy, the hoopoe. Wa'et the atalef, that's the bat. And we know the bat is not a bird, right? The bat is a mammal. So isn't that interesting? Okay, so it really, I guess, really means flying things, but it's not speaking about insects or that are flying in the air. It's speaking about, I guess, either birds or mammals that fly in the air. Okay, so certainly it doesn't mention the flying squirrel, but we can extrapolate that the flying squirrel is not acceptable to be eaten, even though it flies, I don't know, exactly like the bat. I guess it just kind of jumps. But you get the idea, right? So these might just represent different types, and then we can extrapolate from these types as to what other birds are unacceptable to be eaten. But this is a list of specific bird types, specific species or bird types that are unacceptable and that we are supposed to detest. Shaketsu. All right, maybe we'll stop here. I think we will stop here. And then we're going to get to sheretz. So remember, and not to get confused with these two words, the shekets and the sheretz. We saw them both together here in verse 10. Sheretz means swarm. Shekets means a disgusting thing, or to despise or to detest. Okay? Sheretz and shekets. So here we go back to sheretz. So these are things that swarm in the sky. So what swarms in the sky? Gnats, locusts, and so forth. Okay, we're going to pick it up here next time. I think I'm going to stop here. So we got up to, so remember, we got up to Leviticus 11:19. I think we did pretty well today. I really like the idea of disconnecting from the Parshat Shavua. I think it puts a lot less pressure on us to get things done. And therefore, we don't have to, we don't have to skip over things that are important. We don't have to follow the schedule necessarily of the rabbinites. We can go according to our own schedule. And I think this is great. I'm really happy with this. We could just go at our own pace, and maybe we could even take side journeys into specific topics on some Shabbats. I really like this a lot. So I think I'm going to keep this permanent and kind of disconnect from the rabbinical cycle. Maybe at a certain point we'll reconnect, but it was problematic because there was a lot of material to cover in one Shabbat study. I felt under pressure. We were skipping parts, and I like this a lot better. So our cycle may take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, who cares? Let's say 3 years at the pace we're going, I would say. And that's fine. That's totally fine. So before we end it up, any questions, any comments? Anybody? No? Going once? Going twice? Going thrice? Yeah, I agree, Ethan. It really allows us to really cover the Torah like it needs to be covered, rather than having to make choices and rush. And this is great. I'm really happy with this. Okay, so in that case, we're going to end it for this week. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you are in the world. Be'ezarat Yahweh. We'll pick it up again next week. And please do all that, socially kind of thingy stuff, like, subscribe, all that stuff. The replay, you can let anybody know that the replay is always available on the YouTube link that stays permanently on the YouTube channel. And that's it. I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. We'll go out with some music as we usually do. And Be'ezarat Yahweh. See you guys again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
no yishbait ya baba amin wa b'mei shori. Shamayim Oreh